from them. So I built my education business differently. I optimized it for student results, not revenue. And that got us to 97% completion rate. And 70% of students came through word of mouth, because when the students actually get results, they tell everyone. And that's how you can have less than 3% marketing budget. So yeah, if you really like teaching and care about your students, in this video, I'm going to show you the 3 things that you need in order to build an education business that's profitable, stable, and actually get students results. And these 3 things are proof, the program design, and promotion. So let's jump in. All right, let's talk about the thing that most people completely ignore when starting education business, which is proof. What you need to know about this kind of business is that it's a proof business. And here's what I mean. Every business has a hard part. For example, if you go into apparel, clothes, the hard part is marketing, like standing out in a sea of t-shirts and hoodies. On the other hand, if you're running a restaurant, the hard part is operations, consistency, managing staff, keeping quality of food and service high, and so on. Well, education is different. Education is what I call a proof business. The hardest part isn't building the curriculum, and it's not the marketing funnel either. It's actually answering one question, which is why should anyone learn from you? And this is the most overlooked thing in education, and people just skip right past that. They see someone making money, teaching something, and they think, oh, I know this topic too. I'll just make a course as well. But here's what happens. Without a unique proof, you're just another person on the internet telling people what to do. And then you have to outspend everyone on ads. And then you can't charge premium prices. And then you're suddenly competing on price, not value, and you're stuck in a race to the bottom. So what is proof? Well, it's not credentials or degrees or certifications, even though they might be part of that. What proof is your specific story. The thing that makes people say, oh, you are the right, or you're the only person who could teach me this. So for me, when I started the MBA, which is a business school for designers, the proof was pretty straightforward. I graduated from a business school, and I also worked at one of the world's best design agencies. And that was a pretty rare combination. So when I said, hey, I'm teaching business to designers, it clicked. And I wasn't competing with all business teachers, and I wasn't competing with design teachers either. I was basically the only person in this intersection, and I had the perfect credentials. So that is the unique proof. It's not that you're the best teacher, it's that you're the only person with your specific background teaching this specific thing. Now, here's how you can find your proof. Fill in the blank of this statement. I'm the person who, so I teach, So for me, I'm a designer who graduated from a business school and worked at a top design agency, so I teach business to designers. If your sentence is generic, your proof isn't strong enough. You need to find the intersection, like the weird combination of things that you've done that nobody else has. That is your proof. And without it, nothing else works. You can have the best curriculum in the world. It doesn't matter if people don't trust you teaching it. So that's the proof. Now let's talk about a thing that actually transforms students, which is program. Here's a common misconception. Most people think that education is about selling knowledge or selling information. So they record 20 videos, put them in an online portal, and call it a course. And then they wonder why completion rates are 3%. So here's what's actually happening. Information doesn't transform people. If it did, we'd all have 6-packs, because we have all read articles, we watch the videos, we kind of know what to do. The problem is we don't do it, because knowing isn't the same as doing. And your job as an educator, if you actually care about the results of your students, is to create a journey where people actually do the thing, actually achieve the transformation, not just learn about the thing. So what does that actually take? 3 things. First is curriculum. So yes, you need good information, clear frameworks, well-structured content. But that's table stakes. That's not what this business is about. This is just the table stakes, just like the hygiene factor. And that's just 1/3 of what you need. Second, you need social presence. And this is the part that most people skip. Students need to feel seen, and they need accountability. They need to know that someone actually cares if they don't show up. And there's actually research on this. There's a famous paper with over 20,000 citations talking about exactly this phenomenon. We humans want to be seen. We need to know that someone will notice if we don't show up. And without that, motivation dies. And that's why at the MBA, we run cohorts. They have clear deadlines. We check in when students fall behind, and they go through the program in a group, and there's instructors who notice if somebody is gone. That is social presence. Which brings us to the 3rd point, which is deliberate practice. You don't get better by consuming information. You get better by practicing with feedback. And there's a lot of research on this too. Erickson's work on expertise in deliberate practice has thousands of citations. So in our programs, students don't just watch videos about business strategy. They make actual business decisions. They also get feedback, they revise it, and then they do it again. So that is deliberate practice. Okay, so you have a proof and you have a program that works. Now, how do people actually find out about it? Let's talk about promotion. This is what everyone wants to talk about. Funnels, webinars, the latest tactics. And look, distribution matters a lot. But here's the fundamental question for you. Are you a teacher or are you a marketer? Because if you're a teacher at heart, and frankly, this is who this video is for, there's only one approach that works long-term, which is teach as your marketing. Don't try to become a growth hacker. Don't chase the latest trends. Just teach what you know. Give away your best information, because that's how you build trust. And trust is what converts. Now, most people tell you to do short-form content, Instagram posts, LinkedIn carousels, reels, ads. And look, if you're a marketer, that might work for you. That probably will work for you. But if you're a teacher, you're going to burn out, because the short form has 2 problems. First, the shelf life is just hours, maybe days. So you post something, it gets seen once, and then it's just gone. So you have to keep creating, keep posting every single day. And that is extremely exhausting, especially if it isn't your zone of genius. Second problem is that short form interrupts people. Yes, it does get their attention, but it doesn't let you actually teach because you can't explain a concept in 15 seconds. So you can't build real trust that way. So what works for teachers is long form content, YouTube videos, podcasts, long essays or guides. And the reason for this is, again, two reasons. First, the shelf life is years. So a YouTube video I made 3 years ago is still bringing students to the MBA today. A podcast episode can be discovered months or years after you recorded it. Compare that to an Instagram post that dies in just 12 hours. So long form compounds, short form doesn't. Second reason is that long form lets you actually teach. So when someone watches a 20-minute video, you can explain the concept properly. You can give examples, answer questions, show your thinking. And that's what builds real trust. Now, within the long form, video is the best because it engages 3 senses. So people can see you, they can hear you, and they can also read text on the screen. But even a long form article or podcast work, you just might need more time to build the trust. So the key is to go long form, and the strategy is to pick one long form channel, such as YouTube, newsletter, or podcast, and then give away your best knowledge and teach what you know. And do it consistently. Build trust over time. For me, I started with a 40-page guide for designers. I posted it online, and all of a sudden, 1,000 people subscribed to my email list. And that kind of kicked off the whole business. No ads, no funnel, just teaching. And if you do this, and you have proof, and you have a program that works, people will find you because students will tell other students. And that's how you get 70% word of mouth. And that's how you build something stable. All right, the 3 P's of building an education business that's profitable, stable, and actually gets students real results is proof, which is a combination of your unique story and the intersection that nobody owns. Second is program, which is not just giving students information, but also integrating this into social presence and deliberate practice. And third is promotion, where we focus on long-form content and we teach as our marketing to build trust over time. And if you do those 3 things, students will do marketing for you. Now, if you want to go deeper in the program bucket, I made a video sharing my view on how the educational program should be designed based on scientific research and latest technological trends, which also includes AI. So check it out here and see you in the next.
Managing and growing your SOC 2 program is a journey. And there's 2 ways to travel. The manual way, filled with spreadsheets, screenshots.
Everyone knows that you need a framework for working with coding agents, but not many people have one that's simple, really their own, and something they can evolve over time. Now, there are a lot of over-engineered frameworks out there on GitHub. All these multi-agent systems people are creating, I respect what people are working on, but a lot of times you just need something really simple that just gets the job done for you. Because I know that you have good ideas that you want to build, and you don't want to spend more time creating your agentic coding workflows than you do actually coding. And so that's what I have for you right now. This is my dead simple framework that I use every single time I'm starting a new project with my coding agent. Now, brownfield development, working on an existing code base, is slightly different. That's for another video. This, we're focusing on greenfield development. We want a simple framework to get our feet on the ground running as fast as possible, building anything new. And everything that I am covering here is universal. These principles will apply no matter the coding agent that you are using. So there are really 2 parts to this video, and I'm going to be doing a live build with you as I'm explaining everything here to make it super concrete. And so what I have right now with my code base is pretty much nothing besides my AI layer. So there's a few commands and skills that I brought over. This is what I use as a starting point for every single one of my projects. We're going to be creating something from scratch. And so we need to start with our initial planning, creating what is called a PRD. This is the initial scope of work that we have to create the minimum viable product for our application. And there's a lot that goes here, setting up our initial AI layer before we get into any of the actual coding. And then we take our PRD and we split it up into phases of work. And we're going to knock it out with piv loops. And so I'll talk about what that means. We'll see an example of that. And then while I'm going through this entire implementation, I'll be covering the 4 golden rules that we want to follow all of the time. So these golden rules are going to fit in pretty naturally as I'm going through creating the PRD, our AI layer, and doing a piv loop. For example, the context management. Context is your most precious resource when working with AI coding assistants. That's going to be a big theme throughout. Also creating commands and skills for everything and the system evolution mindset, because what we're going for here with our system is to create something that is reliable and repeatable. And so I'll be speaking to that as I go through everything. So just trying to hit on some of the core themes that you'll see throughout this. It's going to be a very value-packed video. And so we'll start here with our initial planning, creating what I like to call the AI layer. So I'll explain what that is and we'll build it together right now. So your AI layer is all the assets in your code base that you created to be context for your coding agent, like your PRD, what are we going to build, your global rules, how are we going to build it, the commands, so we have reusable workflows for our coding agent. We'll focus on the prime one at first, and then also sub agents, so we can delegate for research. And generally how I work with my AI layer, and I have this as a resource for you, is I have a more generic set of commands that I'll bring into any new project. And then the point of this is as my code base grows and I start to build it out, I will also evolve my commands to make them more powerful for the specific use case, just making them more specific to my code. And that's generally my recommendation for you. And so use this as a starting point if you want. I'll have a link to the GitHub repo in the description. The point of keeping this so simple is that you can take it for yourself and easily evolve it for your use case and how you like to work. That's why I recommend something like this over a more complex framework like BMAT or the GitHub Spec Kit. They're really, really powerful, but it's hard to really make it your own. I want you to be able to make this your own. So right now, I'll show you what it looks like to create an entire PRD, define the initial rules for our code base. We'll even customize our first command a little bit, and then I'll talk about subagents throughout. And I know we're doing a lot of planning before we write any of our actual code with the piv loops, but it's important to do this. Doing the planning up front might seem like we're taking things too slow, but if we create a really good plan, like we have good rules, a good PRD, it means that all of our development after is going to be a lot faster and more reliable. So let's start with our PRD. A lot of people call this a spec. Again, it's just the entire scope of work to build out the initial version of our application. And then after that point, when we have a good foundation, it moves more to brownfield development. That's the next video that I've got coming, so stay tuned for that. And so what I'll do here with my Claude code, I got a basically empty project here besides my AI layer, is I will simply have a casual conversation at first, just telling it about my idea, maybe some ideas I have for the tech stack and the architecture. You start really unstructured, which also just makes it easy to get started, and then you eventually get to the point where you use your conversation as context to create a structured PRD. And I have a command that'll help us get the job done. I'll cover that once we get there. But first, let's just start with our idea. And so what I want to build, just as a fun example for this video, is something kind of like Linktree, more like a self-hosted version where you can set up your own kind of landing page that has a bunch of links that you can organize. You have analytics like the click-through rate on your different links. I want to build something like this. It's a good example for right now because it's not super trivial where you could just vibe code it really easily with some of the more cool features we can add in, but also it's not going to be overly complicated where we'll barely have anything by the end of this video. And so I'm going to use a speech-to-text tool to get the job done here. I highly recommend using something like Aqua Voice. This is what I use. There are a lot of good free and open source options as well. Whisperflow, Epicenter Whispering, great tools that we have here. But I love using speech-to-text because I can promise you I will never be able to type 226 words per minute. So I'll use a tool like this just to give a big brain dump at first for what I want to build. And this is going to be really raw, but I'm going to go ahead and do a brain dump live for you right now. And pay attention to what I ask Claude Code to do for me, because this is just as important as the ideas that I'm sharing. I'll explain a little bit about that after as well. And by the way, you can do this entire thing with any AI coding assistant. So here we go. I want to build a link in bio page builder. So something kind of like Linktree. Users can create an account, they can create their own landing page where they specify the links, they can change the order. I want them to be able to have analytics so they can view the click-through rates on their links as well. They can customize the theme. And then for the tech stack, I'm thinking probably like Next.js. I'd like to use Neon for my database and Neon authentication. So definitely spin up a subagent to do some research for that. And then for the architecture, not super picky on that. Definitely want your recommendations for that and just how we're going to handle the theming and the link building, all of that. And so I want you to also spin off an agent to do a bunch of web research on just like best practices for creating these Linktree type applications. And then what I want you to do after is come back to me with a bunch of questions so we can get on the same page with even the little details for what we are building here. All right, very good. So I'm going to go ahead and send that off and it'll just transcribe in a couple of seconds here. There we go. And boom. When a coding agent makes 100, because you can have with its assumptions process of the piv loops that we'll talk about in a little bit. And so with Claude Code, I don't actually have to create my own subagents because we have the exploration and research subagents built right into the tool. For other coding agents, you might have to build your own, which is why I wanted to call it out here. But pretty much every single good coding agents these days supports the idea of subagents. And I love using them for research. And the reason for that is context isolation. Again, one of the key themes here is we want to really protect the context of our main coding agent. And the reason that research is such a good use case for subagents specifically is because when they explore, they're looking at everything. They're doing a bunch of code-based exploration or web research. They're loading in tens, even hundreds of thousands of tokens for their work, but really all we care about is their findings, the summary at the end that they return to our main context. And so we can keep our main context clean. I don't recommend using subagents for implementation because with implementation, we usually care about all of the context of the files that we've been editing and creating. Otherwise, it leads to a lot of hallucinations in my experience. And that's also why Claude Code doesn't have any built-in agents for implementation. It's just for research. And that's exactly what we are seeing right here. And so I'm going to let everything complete and then I'll come back once it has the questions for us. All right. So all of our subagent research is done and we now have the initial set of questions to answer. And as I go through this, I think you'll really appreciate as much as I do because we are clarifying a ton of things. Every single question that we answer here is removing an assumption from the coding agent. And because it's multiple choice, and usually one of the options it presents here is good, we can blitz through this really quickly. And so we can be pretty confident going into the implementation that we have all of the details locked down. And so for example, how should the public page URL structure work? I actually like option number 1 here, and then boom, on to the next one. How many pages should each user be able to create? Let's just do 1 page per user. I mean, some of these I'm just going to keep going with the defaults here, but there are a lot of instances where it really fundamentally misunderstands something, and that's where I can type my own answer to really clarify. So I don't know if I'll run into an example right here, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and answer all of its questions, come back once I've done that. You don't really need to see me do every single question here because it might do up to like 20, 25 questions. Like it will take this pretty far. And so again, you have to be a bit patient with this, but every single question you answer could save you from having hundreds of lines of bad code. So actually here is a good example where I want to clarify something entirely different from what it suggested here. So it's saying, this is the second batch of questions that Claude has asked me, by the way. Should the link editor have a live phone frame preview? So kind of like Lovable or Bolt on New, where you have the view of what you're creating and then you have the builder on the left side, or should it be inline? And I kind of want to actually have both options here. So I can go to the chat about this. And so then it will ask me the other questions after, but now we get to have a little bit of a conversation for this thing specifically. And so I'll say right here, I want to have an inline editor, but I want the option to be able to see the preview. So I send that in. that's when an agent decides to read context, like understanding how to do something new. And so I'm creating a command here because I'm deciding, okay, at this point in the conversation, I want to run this command to output a structured PRD. So as a part of this command, I'm giving it the exact structure, all the different sections that I want in the PRD. So that way I'm making my whole process repeatable, right? A big part of this system that I'm showing you here is you can create something that works for you, and then you can do it over and over and over again for new features and new code bases. And so I'm going to do /create PRD. I'm going to let it rip, and I'll come back once we have our final PRD. All right, so our PRD is now created, and it is very comprehensive, but that's good because it's not like we're going to send this into our coding agent to implement. Instead, we're going to build things in phases that are described by our PRD. So I'm not going to do a ton of validation on camera right now. Definitely not worth your time, but I do want to say that it is important or out of scope, which is equally as important what we don't want to build right now. We have the entire directory structure, so it already understands generally what is going to go into our code base, which is good because we've already established our tech stack and MVP. And by the way, here's the section itself where I lay out the phases. Each one of these is going to be a granular implementation, one of our piv loops. So we build a foundation, then we build the link management, then we do the theme. And we're going to plan each one of these individually. Biggest first because our rules are getting to our first implementation. The next thing that we have to set up is our rules. And this is going to be pretty basic at first because our rules are definitely going to evolve the most as we are evolving our actual code base. And so I'm using Claude Code. I'm just referring to .agents and agents.md because this is more of the universal standard for the naming for global rules. And so the important thing here is that the constraints and conventions that we always want our coding agent to follow, this goes in our global rule file. And so this is things like the commands to run our application, our testing strategy, our logging strategy. No matter what we're building, we always want our coding agent to see this. And so we want to create this right now, at least an initial version to get us started. And then the other component I have here is the reference folder. You can also use Claude Code skills for this, by the way, but this is just more universal. Because a lot of times we have other contexts we want the agent to have in mind, but only when we're working on specific parts of our application, like a guide to building front-end components if we're working on the front end. And the reason we don't want to just dump this all into our agents.md is this is loaded into the context of the coding agent identify everything. Just like I have a template I like for my PRDs, I have a template that I like for creating my global rules. And so first, we are going to discover what we already have in the code base, because I created this to work for existing code bases and new ones. Testing and that I love using for all of my global rules. And you can see that everything here we really do. I'll go into Claude here and really just in the same conversation where I created my PRD, I'm just going to do create rules because I can really use all of this conversation as context to help. So it just right away it knows these are a lot bigger because when we are working on the task and it's very specific to this, then it's okay to bring in a lot more information to make sure we have good guidance for our coding agent. So again, going back to our diagram here, the rules, this is how we want to build things. The PRD is what exactly we're going to build. Rules and those generic commands that I brought in that you can feel free to use for yourself. And so we're going on to the implementation now. But here's the thing. At the start of every new conversation with an AI coding assistant, we need it to catch itself up to speed on the code base. What are we building? What do checking the git log, because that's another thing that I'll talk about more in a bit as well, is using git log as our long-term memory. So it can see over time how our code base has been evolving, because that'll help it make decisions around what it's going to build next. And so after this command, it's going to output to us its understanding of the code base. So we can validate it knows what's up with our code base, and we can go on to building the next thing. And so not to cover the prime command in too much detail right here, but we do some operations with git to take advantage of the history. And then we're reading through the core files and identifying anything that we need to pay special attention to that are like main entry points to our application, for example. And then this output report is how we can validate its understanding. And we can evolve this over time to make it specific to our project. Just to give you one really small example here, for reading core documentation, I could say read the drizzle migrations so you understand the database, things like that. Loop. And in bio page builder, the current state, and then it pulled the first phase, the foundation, from our PRD. And this is what it's recommending that we build. And that's exactly what I am going for here. I want it to pick out phases one at a time from the PRD, so we have granular implementations for our piv loops, which, speaking of the piv loops, we are going to get into this now. And so piv is short for plan, implement, validate. We take focused work, usually a phase from a PRD, and we run it through this entire process. So we create a structured plan, that's this part right here, around what we're going to tackle. And this process is actually pretty similar to creating a PRD. Then we go into the implementation, and our goal here is to delegate all coding to the coding agent. And then we do the validation after. And so I'm going to cover really quickly what this process looks like. Then we're going to go through it in action. And so first of all, when we are in our planning, we have two layers of planning. We have the top level project planning. That is what we already did, creating our PRD and our rules. And now we have the task specific planning. So like I just mentioned, these are pretty similar. Creating a structured plan is pretty similar to creating our structured PRD. The main difference is the structured plan is just very focused on an individual feature and all of the tasks that come with that. So now we're getting down to the code. We're not as high level, but we are still going to start with a very unstructured conversation. I like to call it vibe planning, where we're just going to explore general ideas. What's the architecture for what we're building specifically, spinning off subagents for code base analysis and documentation, and then just figuring out like what are the specific tasks that we need to knock out for this feature. And so we have this conversation, I'll show you an example of this, and then we turn that into a structured document, just like with the PRD. So the goal here is to create a detailed plan of attack for the AI coding assistant based on our conversation. So the conversation is a part of our context. But here we have very specific sections that I want to create in the structured plan. The goal and success criteria of this feature, any documentation that we want to reference that maybe one of the subagents found, our task list, which can be as specific as even the individual files that we want to create and update. And then probably the most important part out of this entire plan is the validation strategy. This is kind of like test-driven development, where we want to be very specific with how we can validate the feature before we even write a single line of code. This forces both us and the coding agent to be very specific about the success criteria. And so we create our structured plan, and we are very much a part of this, but then we delegate all of the coding to the agent itself. This is not vibe coding though. The only reason that I'm going to trust the agent but verify is because I am sandwiching the implementation with the planning and the validation that I am very much a part of the process for. And so we are going to have the coding agent check its own work with unit testing, integration testing, and end-to-end testing. We'll see that as well. But then I am going to run my own code review and manually test the application. I'll spin it up myself. I'll go through the application just like a user would, make sure that everything is working good before I make that commit and send it off to production or staging or whatever. The important thing here is that in between the planning and the implementation, I am going to be resetting the context. This is one of the golden rules. Context is very precious. And so I have a long and detailed conversation figuring out this feature we're going to implement. And then the structured plan that I create right here, I want it to be all of the context the coding agent needs to get the job done so that I can have a fresh conversation where the plan is the only thing I send in because it has all the documentation to reference. It has the entire task list. So we know what we have to do. We know how to validate. So that way we can just cut things off and go into execution to keep things very focused, right? We want to not have a bunch of context bloating the conversation when we get into writing the actual code. All right, so with that, let's now get into our first piv loop. And this is going to be a lot simpler than you would think because we really are going to reap the rewards from all of the planning that we did up front. We are on the same page with our coding agent. We're confident, understands what we want to build. And so there's not even that much planning we're going to have to do for each of these phases, at least at first. And so going back here, we have finished the prime. We are on the same page with the coding agent. And I just gave it a really simple prompt here. Like, yeah, phase one looks good. Just confirm to me exactly everything we're going to build. Now, usually for piv loops after the first one, it's a bit more detailed. Like, let's look at the code base and figure out how exactly we're going to build this. But right here, it's really simple.
No, I think if I could give one piece of advice to my younger self, it would be one of the cornerstones that I teach in Maker School and Make Money with Make, which is outputs lag relative to inputs. So if you provide a lot of inputs, you will not see the result of those inputs for a little while. And so if you have a very tight feedback loop like I do, and I like to see results with the things that I do very quickly, if you spend a week doing something, you don't see those results. It's not because the week that you spent doing the thing has not yielded any results. It's because life just has some little built-in lag. You're not going to see those results for like a month. So if you really wanted to be smart about it, you would get some assumption that what you were doing is the right thing. Okay, you would believe it really deeply because you've thought a lot about it and you built some logic out. And you say, if I submit 10 Loom videos every single day to creators that I admire and I message them over Instagram, LinkedIn, X, whatever, mathematically I should get a result. If you can ground some assumption, and then if you can just do it for a very long period of time, eventually those inputs will catch up to those outputs, and then you will start seeing the results. When I started my like brand journey, it was actually quite a while ago. It was almost 5 or 6 years ago. I started blogging every single day. So I wrote a blog every day for 30 days. It was part of the big blog challenge between me and a few of my friends. One of my friends making YouTube videos, and one of my friends is doing blogs like me, another one is doing something else. And I did like 30 blogs. I like broke my back over it. It was like hour and a half, 2 hours a day, me writing and researching, spending a lot of time and taking away from a lot of other things I could have been doing, to be honest. Probably should not have started that to begin with. Anyway, at the end of the 30 days, I had like 5 views or something. It was pathetic. It was so silly. Nobody had looked at any one of my blog posts. So what did I do at the end of the 30 days? I said, well, I'm not seeing any results. And because I'm an intelligent person, I have a tight feedback loop. I'm always about iterating, right? So I didn't see any results for this, so I should iterate and I should do something different. Well, the fundamental problem that I had there, the mistaken error, was that I didn't realize to what degree outputs lag over inputs. Because a year or so later, I looked back on blogs that I'd written a year before, and a dozen of them were ranking on the first page of Google for their search term. I was getting hundreds of hits to my website, hundreds of opportunities to sell products related to those blogs. Imagine if I had just continued doing that one blog post a day. By the end of the year, I probably would have been one of the more prolific bloggers on the internet, like legitimately, because all of this stuff is so exponential. Same thing with my YouTube channel. So I took that lesson that I learned about inputs lagging over outputs, and then I just said, okay, screw it. I'm just going to continue making YouTube videos every day for a month, and I'll worry about where I land later. So I did it for a full 30 days. I learned that the market rewards you, but it rewards you later. So I took that knowledge with me from my failure in blogging, and then I made the YouTube. And then now that I've actually stuck with it, now that I'm consistent with it, now I'm one of the bigger creators in my space. And certainly I think probably the most respected. So yeah, I guess just outputs lag over inputs. If you believe deeply that what you are doing is the right thing, then don't worry too much about that feedback, at least in the first month or so. Give yourself a little bit of grace and a little bit of space to take more time to do those things and achieve those results. And I think if you just multiply the amount of time you think it'll take to see something by 2 or 3 or something, that's probably a good heuristic. You're probably a lot more likely to actually succeed realistically.
Managing and growing your SOC 2 program is a journey. And there's 2 ways to travel. The manual way, filled with spreadsheets, screenshots, follow-ups, fatigue, and audit failures that kill sales conversations. And then there's Sprinto. Sprinto plugs into all the systems you're already using, so you can start collecting the evidence a SOC 2 auditor needs from day 1. With a centralized dashboard, you see risks early, remediate fast, and walk into audits with receipts. And with a common compliance framework, those SOC 2 controls get mapped to over 30+ frameworks. So you walk into any new industry, geography, and enterprise deal with the confidence to close. Book a demo today.
All right, we have a very serious problem here in America. This is something that I need to make a video on because not enough people are talking about it. It is a violation, a deep violation of ethics. And it just makes me sick, honestly. The behavior I'm seeing, not only is it not ethical, it could be downright felonious. So you're probably asking yourself, well, what the heck are we talking about? What is this felonious behavior? Well, you wouldn't believe what Google just recently discovered. Google DeepMind and the GTIG, that of course stands for Google Threat Intelligence Group, have identified increase in model extraction attempts or distillation attacks, a method of intellectual property theft that violates Google's terms of service. Yes, you heard it here first. The company in which has stolen the world's data to sell back to us in the form of generative AI is upset because there is someone stealing from the generative AI. Oh my gosh, you cannot make this up, dude. The fact that Google is even attempting to cry intellectual property theft, this has to be one of the most rich ironies I have ever seen in my entire lifetime. It's not just Google. OpenAI is also blowing the whistle on the alarm, okay? OpenAI believes the best future is one in which we move forward with democratic AI. By the way, by democratic AI, they certainly don't mean open sourcing more of their models, okay? Wow. That would be way too democratic. AI that is shaped by the principles America has always stood for. In advancing democratic AI, America is competing with the Chinese Communist Party, determined to become the global leader in AI by 2030. That's one reason why the release of DeepSeek R1's model at the Lunar New Year 1 year ago was so noteworthy as a gauge of the state of competition. It goes on later to say that OpenAI is providing an assessment of DeepSeek's distillation techniques, effectively just going through how they're going about taking all the data from, say, OpenAI or from Google or from Anthropic and using it to train their model. And you already know how Dario feels about those Chinese open source models, okay? Open weights? Not in this household. All right, for those that have no idea even what distillation and all those things are, I can give like a very, very high 30,000 foot overview of what actually goes on. So with these LLMs, effectively you go through kind of 2 major rounds of training. Now this is obviously much more complex in actual practice, but for the sake of this video, you can think of it as 2 rounds. There's this pre-training data kind of section, which is going to be feeding in a list of words that you say find from a blog, and then having the model predict the next word that's going to come out of the blog, and then correcting all of the billions upon billions of parameters according to the 8-line algorithm known as backpropagation. When I was learning about this back in college, back when I was getting my old master's in the AIs, there's a lot of partial differentials. What error backpropagation really means is just simply the proportion in which you incorrectly contributed to the answer is the proportion in which you should change, and along with some multiplication kind of scaling down called the learning rate. Anyway, so this kind of gives the models their basic shape, and then there's the second one called instruction tuning, in which you have a question and then you have an answer. This is kind of how AIs go from just simply next word, prediction into kind of this more broader, like, hey, how does this work? Well, this is exactly how it works, and this is blah, 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 blah. And that is through this phase right here. Now, how DeepSeek works is that, hey, ChatGPT, how do I code a Python server? That's the question. Guess what the answer is? It's just doing the instruction tuning by using ChatGPT. From this lovely video, which I'll link in the description, they typically call this behavioral cloning. And that is because you're getting none of the nuance of the pre-training and kind of learning what is like halfway matching. You just simply go, okay, this is how you should answer always. You're just trying to mimic the behavior of another model. And this is where Google and OpenAI and all of them are claiming intellectual property theft. China is stealing their instruction tuning. I cannot believe we live in a world where Google, one of the leaders in stealing the world's data for pre-training, actually has the cojones to be able to release an executive summary claiming that people are stealing their intellectual property and breaking terms of services. Bro, how many terms of services have you broken by gathering pre-training data from sites? You know you have literally broken millions, if not tens of millions of terms of services throughout the internet. So to actually like write it down like, dude, you know what's super unfair and unethical? When people steal from us. Dude, it's like the most classic definition of unethical. It's always this way. It's like, yeah, ethics don't really count until it's unethical for me. Then it counts. Then it's for real. Then I'm like upset about it. Like, how dare you come in here and steal intellectual property? I mean, I know like 5 minutes ago I said intellectual property is fake and doesn't exist, but no, it's real now. This just shows me that there's really one big takeaway, which is always the exact same takeaway. It's not about the democratic AI and everybody gets AI. It's about the democratic AI that only I can provide for you, okay? OpenAI, Google, they want to be at the tippity top. They want to be the ones providing the AI, shaping its input, being able to say what is and what is not allowed to be said. I'm not really convinced it's for anything else but the bottom line. And so when Google cries intellectual property theft, not gonna lie, I don't shed a single tear. The name is the Kimi Kaijin. Hey, do you want to learn how to code? Do you want to become a better back-end engineer? Well, you got to check out boot.dev. Now, I personally have made a couple courses from them. I have live walkthroughs free available on YouTube of the whole course. Everything on boot.dev you can go through for free. But if you want the gamified experience, the tracking of your learning and all that, then you got to pay up the money. But hey, go check them out. It's awesome. Many content creators you know and you like make courses there. boot.dev/prime for 25% off.
The online education space is unfortunately full of people who don't care if their students learn anything. They only care if they buy from them. So I built my education business differently. I optimized it for student results, not revenue. And that got us to 97% completion rate. And 70% of students came through word of mouth, because when the students actually get results, they tell everyone. And that's how you can have less than 3% marketing budget. So yeah, if you really like teaching and care about your students, in this video, I'm going to show you the 3 things that you need in order to build an education business that's profitable, stable, and actually get students results. And these 3 things are proof, the program design, and promotion. So let's jump in. All right, let's talk about the thing that most people completely ignore when starting education business, which is proof. What you need to know about this kind of business is that it's a proof business. And here's what I mean. Every business has a hard part. For example, if you go into apparel, clothes, the hard part is marketing, like standing out in a sea of t-shirts and hoodies. On the other hand, if you're running a restaurant, the hard part is operations, consistency, managing staff, keeping quality of food and service high, and so on. Well, education is different. Education is what I call a proof business. The hardest part isn't building the curriculum, and it's not the marketing funnel either. It's actually answering one question, which is why should anyone learn from you? And this is the most overlooked thing in education, and people just skip right past that. They see someone making money, teaching something, and they think, oh, I know this topic too. I'll just make a course as well. But here's what happens. Without a unique proof, you're just another person on the internet telling people what to do. And then you have to outspend everyone on ads. And then you can't charge premium prices. And then you're suddenly competing on price, not value, and you're stuck in a race to the bottom. So what is proof? Well, it's not credentials or degrees or certifications, even though they might be part of that. What proof is your specific story. The thing that makes people say, oh, you are the right, or you're the only person who could teach me this. So for me, when I started the MBA, which is a business school.
This is going to be one of the most intricate deep dives that I have ever done, especially in the context of a live setting. So if you have some water with you, get that ready, and we're going to get straight into it. Alrighty, so some ground rules before we get started, okay? If you guys have a notebook, grab that, and a pen or a pencil. Don't take notes on the computer. Writing stuff down is going to help you remember it more. So definitely take notes. Grab yourself a pen and paper and a notebook. And I want you to stay until the end because we've got exclusive bonus resources, templates, script banks, plus the actual Q&A where I'm going to answer all of your guys' questions. And we're not going to end the Q&A until all the questions are answered, okay? So if you want to get the most out of this workshop right now, there's 4 main things that you really got to do. Stay engaged in chat, right? Ask questions live. Because I've spoken to well over 1,000 of you at this point, a lot of you guys have ideas. It's the simple fact that there's too many ideas. You don't know what to do with them. You don't know which one you want to capitalize on. And that's the actual execution, closing high-ticket deals and quitting their jobs right now in 2026. A prime example of which, Tamir, one of our founders from Code to CEO. Now, his offer, especially in this day and age, it was an AI call center. People refer to this as AI voice agents, AI receptionist. Pretty much this is run-of-the-mill, the most basic quote-unquote offer that there's particular of entry is now gone. Everybody can make something, right? But the barrier to success is now higher than ever. What you end up happening is we have a bunch of supply of random useless software, right? And we don't really have the same demand for this software. And it's not, and just look at the graveyard of engineering side projects. It is crazy how big it is, right? You have abandoned GitHub repos, you have unused SaaS, really product, and validation before code. Every single time, this is how we're going to proceed, okay? And look, I get it. Your first reply as a software engineer is, but go, I want to build software. That's what literally we do. That's our entire point. And I get you, trust me. But that's exactly why I'm doing this workshop right now. Because not too long ago, I was also a software engineering manager at Fortune 500, taking home a technical skill nobody asked for. After months, playbook that turned my failed side projects into a high margin software business. And once again, this process works. I've seen it time and time again with myself, as well as with other Code to CEO founders. Sandra, she was over leveraged working 2 full-time jobs. Fast over to today, she's doing over $20,000 a month consistently, and she's quit both of her jobs. So she's not relying on a 9-to-5 for income. Paul, literally bottleneck for you guys. But guess what? I had the same exact doubts. It doesn't matter that one of you is from the EU, one of you is from America, one of you is from Brazil, right? Perfect. I'm seeing a lot of readies. There we go. I love the exclamation marks. There we go. Perfect, guys. Excited. Alrighty, let's get straight into it, okay? Better. And you know the same exact business owners as I do on a level that I know that. That's why I'm comfortably even giving this out, right? Because for you, it might not be a good idea to follow suit. So that's exactly why there is no universally good or bad idea. It's just what's a good idea for you and what's a bad idea for you, okay? Fundamentally, this is why copying somebody else's business idea almost never works. Keyword almost, okay? Because businesses rely on your unique leverage as opposed to the idea itself. So I want you guys to start thinking of your advantages and not a specific business idea. Now, keep in mind, you don't have their advantages, but most of you might say, well, what about the German brothers who took Amazon and eBay and all these other US companies and started doing it in Europe and started making billions of dollars? To that, I'll say, these individuals who stole that idea, right? I'm saying steal as like a kind of a big word, but let's just say who copied the idea of Amazon. They had an advantage. They had the location advantage of being located in Europe and Germany to be able to capitalize on this opportunity. They also had the network necessary, right, to be able to fund these ventures and actually get stuff created out. So while they copied an idea, that idea was still relatively good for them because they had the advantages to take advantage of the opportunity. Does that make sense? There's a few myths and realities that we kind of take a look at when it comes to ideas that most software engineers have, okay? Most software engineers think that they have to do something new, okay? They have to create something new, a new gimmick, a new software, something of that sort. But fundamentally, novelty doesn't actually win. Unique advantage wins. If you take a look at businesses for thousands of years, it's pretty much been the same problem solved in just different ways, right? You have the problem of, let's say, cleaning clothes, right? It started off with dry cleaning. You now have applications, right, where people can come pick up your clothes and send it to the dryer or a washer. Still the same problem, but solved in various ways. So it's not necessarily that the novelty of it is winning. It's that the unique advantage that you have that you bring to that idea that's going to allow you to win. The second is the build trap. This is the one that Pretty much every single software engineer I know fell into it, myself included. Oh, if I build the best technical product, it's going to naturally win. Not necessarily the case. You can have a phenomenal product, but if you don't validate it, it's not going to win. The one that's going to win is the one that validated the fastest and the first, right? The third one, the total addressable market. Oh, if I have a very big total addressable market, if I'm making a consumer app and I can target the entire world, it's going to succeed 100%. Not necessarily. You need to know exactly who you're going to sell to, and you need to have the timing behind you as well. So once again, don't look for the best idea. Look for the idea where you have an unfair advantage in. A lot of you watching this have ideas that you can capitalize on right now. You would have an advantage over me, such that if we were to compete, you would beat me at it, because that's where your unfair advantage lies in. Okay. So once again, stop asking, is this a good SaaS idea or is this a good business idea? And I want you to instead start asking, can I sell this as a service first? Because that's going to determine how you can validate whatever idea you have and if it's actually a good idea for you. And since we're on that topic, I want you to think about the last idea that you actually had. Genuinely, was it a good idea for you, or just a cool idea in general that you thought would work because people would want it? Drop it down in the chat below. I want to see what the general consensus is between people and whether or not they chose the idea based on kind of their unfair advantage or where they had an advantage in, or they just chose an idea because they went on Reddit or they asked an LLM about it or they just saw a post about it. How did you kind of come up with that idea? And think about it. What was it for you? Was it actually a good idea for you? Or now that you think back, it was just a cool/bad idea? There we go. So Jason already said a cool idea in general. Kim said cool idea. Yep, there we go. So most people thought that it was a cool idea, right? So that's where the problem really lies in. We cannot go after quote unquote cool ideas. We have to understand that these ideas have to be good for us specifically. Yeah, see, Ask LLM couldn't validate, trying to validate through AI research. See, none of these are, on a grand scheme of things, good ideas for you, right? It's just a cool idea that you're looking to validate through an LLM. Yeah, never considered my advantage on it. It was an interesting domain. Cool idea. Oh, we see a couple good ideas. Alessandro, good idea. There we go. Cool idea. Perfect. So we understand now fundamentally what we have to do, right? Not choose cool ideas just because they sound cool, but rather go after ideas that are actually good for us. Okay. Yeah. See. So let's figure out the right idea. Trying to validate through AI research. Do that. Well, that's where we get to the ideation formula. Now we'll be able to understand what makes a good idea for you specifically. Okay. This is what I call the leverage zone. Some of you might already be familiar with this because I bring this up every single opportunity I can. Okay. All of you have a unique advantage. This unique advantage is composed of your experience, your location, and your network. So what you can build, what you've gone through, your physical presence, and who you know, right? And a good idea for you is taking that unique advantage and applying it to essentially your fit as a founder, to you finding a clear buyer, and you having the right timing. The key point here is that if any of these factors are zero, the net result becomes zero, and you do not have a winning, executable, validated idea. So the biggest moat here is your unique advantage, and afterwards, these things come into play. For most often than not, in the current time frame that we're living in 2026, all of these you already pretty much have, because the right timing, literally AI and software is dominating the world right now, so there's no better timing. Clear buyer, so many people who are in need of both software and AI, right? Founder fit, the fact that you guys are already here on this webinar wanting to learn shows the obsession and stamina that you have to be able to do what you need to do. Meaning, the only real thing that's lacking here is taking a look at your unique advantage and seeing how that can be applied to get your winning idea. Now, let's kind of break this down one by one so we have a better understanding of it. When I say experience, I really mean the depth and the speed, so the execution of things. Can you prototype something in days? Can you solve problems that other people cannot? When I say network, I'm really talking about distribution or budget access. Can you get warm intros to any specific budget owners? Can you bypass gatekeepers, right? And when I say location, I mean asymmetric access. So what's your positioning like? Do you have physical proximity to certain things that other people don't? Local chamber of commerce, let's say, or a very specific business event. So let's look at these one by one so you have an even better understanding. First, let's talk about experience, okay? This is what I call the T-shaped breakdown of experience, the foundation of your unique advantage or unfair advantage or leverage zone. I'm going to use these interchangeably. They're synonyms. We're going to analyze the depth, the breadth, and the transferability of your experiences to find your actual asymmetric leverage. This is the breadth, by the way, and this is the depth, so horizontal and vertical. Now, experience, you need to take a look at it from 3 angles. That's deep domain expertise. So a lot of you guys that I've talked to have had years in one particular industry, right? You've built very specialized systems and you're a pretty good known expert in your niche. I was talking to somebody who literally had a shrimping business and he built software for shrimping businesses. I did not know of any other software engineer who did that, right? You guys have also worked across the entire stack. You've worked across multiple technologies, right? You've had experience spanning multiple industries. I know some of you went from healthcare to, let's say, oil and gas, and then back to tech and things like that. So you've worn many hats simultaneously, especially those of you who worked in startups. And of course, the transferability, the speed of execution. A lot of you guys had to learn new tools extremely quickly, especially with AI coming in. You had to get used to the coding agents. You had to learn how to use Cloud Code. You had to learn how to read the MD files, right? How to create them and all these things. And you had to ramp up in pretty unfamiliar industries, especially when you were just starting off or moving from job to job. So the end all be all is based on your experience. Can you do certain things that might take you days, whereas for other people it will take months? Or can you do certain things that other people cannot do, either as quickly or as good, right? And the way that you kind of check this is based on whatever you do. Can you solve problems others can't? Do you ship outcomes and not just features? Can you explain it without technical jargon? And can you do it in days, right? How quickly can you do it? The speed behind it. Next, we have our network, right? So network leverage really, once again, kind of manifests in 3 different ways, at least 3 big ones that we want to take a look into. First off, you have warm introductions to people in your network, meaning you can literally pick up the phone, call somebody in your network, and there's zero friction to that first meeting. So if you know a business owner, or if you know a big shot, then you are going to instantly just call and you're good, okay? Budget access. Can you talk to the people who are in charge of giving you money? A lot of people, let's give an example. If I know a particular dentist in my area, I can call the dentist on his personal cell, ask him to sell, and I can easily sell him something. He's going to write the check for me. Whereas every other individual would have had to call, go through a gatekeeper, a receptionist. The receptionist would make the choice to pass it on to the dentist or not, right? And then the trust shortcuts. You have literal shortcuts you can use in your network that's going to open a lot of doors for you, right? Let's say somebody you know knows somebody else that's looking for a particular solution and they connect you, essentially arbitrage, right? If you have to cold call everybody, you have zero network advantage. So start where you are going to have an advantage. And I know some of you might say, what if I don't know many people and I'm bad at networking, like Anissa here asked? No matter how bad you are at networking, no matter how few people you know, you will always have a shortcut to something, okay? Take a look at that shortcut and see what it actually is. Next thing, right, in terms of signal checking it. Well, do you have warm intros to budget owners? Can you bypass gatekeepers, as we talked about? Do you have existing trust shortcuts? If I told you right now, book 10 calls this week, would you be able to strictly to your network, right? And then last but not least, we have location leverage. So are there any businesses near you that are underserved? Most often than not, for many of you, this will always be the case. Nobody focuses on a local basis. In fact, everybody tells you not to go local, which in my opinion is one of the dumbest advices anybody can ever say, right? Next thing, cost of living there. Cost arbitrage. Most of you that are outside of, let's say, the US are looking for US clients, but take a look at your own local setting. What is the cost of living? Are you able to get clients from your area such that it can suffice for what the goals you want to get to, right? Most of you don't want to become billionaires. You just want to make, let's say, a few million or a few $100,000 to be able to achieve financial freedom. You can almost always do that no matter the country you're from, just on your local setting. And can you show up to their office, right? There you can build trust with people one-on-one, directly talking to them, that you simply cannot do if they're 1,000 miles away from you, right? If you walk up to somebody's office and you start speaking and you know they're a local, they know you, that is very different than just talking to people online, okay? And I want to point this out. Many people underestimate this. Your location is one of the most important factors on deciding what idea you will execute. Pay very careful attention to it. Most of you that are talking to AI right now, most of you that are prompting AI and trying to get an LLM to give you ideas, are not even asking for it to give you the location. You're simply just asking it, scrape Reddit for me and give me ideas. You need to include the location in there. Your location is one of the most fundamental things that will help you with your ideation, okay? So signal check. Do you have access that other people do not? Be it a chamber of commerce, be it a specific business event, be it a specific industry, right? Is your geography itself a moat that other people can access? Are you positioned in a high signal community? Do you have a timing edge that competitors like? For example, the US is, generally speaking, leading in tech, right? With AI adoption, with Silicon Valley, all these things. So if you're in somewhere like the UAE, where they're a few years behind all this adaptation, you can take stuff from the US and apply it to the UAE simply because of your location, okay? Keep that in mind. Now, let's kind of do a combination and see what this leverage zone would look like if we combine our network, our experience, and our location, right? So take a look at friends, family, former colleagues, neighbors, alumni, literally anybody you know on a first-name basis, really. Your experience, any previous jobs you held, significant life events, many of you are parents, right? Any deep interests or hobbies, unique challenges faced, specifically for location, any local events, meetups, chamber of commerce events, business environments, schools and universities. You can easily get, let's say, junior developers working for you, right? Specific any demographics as well. And look for the overlap where all these three intersect for the maximum leverage that you can. So ask yourself these questions. Who in my network could help me? What have I built before that solved the real problem? What advantage do I have with my geographical location? And what past experiences will give me a unique insight into a particular problem that I'm trying to solve? So understanding all of that, here is what you need to do. Evaluate your idea against you, okay? The current idea that you have in your mind right now, the current idea that you found using an LLM, do you have a unique advantage there, either through your location, network, or experience? Can you reach buyers without having to cold spam? Can you at least reach one buyer without having to pick up the phone and call a person that you don't know? If it's going to be a complete stranger, that is probably not the best idea that you should do, right? Is there a clear buyer with a budget? Or do you not even know who's going to be buying your essentially product or service depending on the idea that you have, right? And is the timing right? Is there big enough pain in the market right now, and are people willing to pay for it? Evaluate your idea against your own thing. Remember that. And now that you mapped your advantage, now that we've understood what we have to do, let's actually prove that somebody will pay us for everything that we did. So take 60 seconds, write down one idea that fit the entire advantage that we created, and then post it down in the chat below. And I'll take a look at it after the fact. Because once again, even though that idea might fit your unique advantage right now, it does not matter if we cannot validate it, okay? Nothing means anything if we don't validate it. So let's talk about validation. Specifically, validation before coding, okay? I'm going to give a very specific example of this because one of our founders inside Code2CEO, Dom, had a very unique interaction where they met somebody on a plane. He found their problem, talked to them, pitched them, and got paid for a one-day workshop, about 7,000 Australian dollars. And this is just to showcase the validation process and how powerful it really becomes. Just from talking to somebody on literally the plane, made an extra $7,000, and plus that's going to lead to more engagements down the line. But that's what he did. Within that plane ride, he validated it by getting payment, okay? Remember, building got faster, but proving demand did not. In fact, I would say it got slower because people thought that, hey, just because I can build stuff, I don't have to market it now. So you can ship a prototype in a weekend, but launching a service lets you validate stuff while earning. And Scott, what did he do? I'll get to it at the end. You can ask that question later. So the clear principle here is as follows. Separate interest from intent before you write a single line of code, okay? Once again, separate people's interest from actual intent. There are 5 validation mistakes that people make when it comes to separating interest from intent, and I'm going to talk about them before we get into how to actually validate stuff. So let's talk about the 5 validation mistakes. And the last one here is the one that most software engineers make. We're going to go through these one by one, and each one literally kills your entire business. So mistake number 1, you mistake compliments for an actual validated signal, okay? You'll hear, that's a great idea. I would totally use that. That's so cool, man. That does not mean anything, okay? That literally means nothing. Only form of validation is people paying you money, okay? If nobody pays you money, that is not validation. And if they're not paying you money, they have to at least book time with you or at least share some form of data. Understand that validation at its core requires concrete intent action, okay? That's what I mean by intent, Tom. That's exactly what it means. Number 2, people choose the wrong interview targets, okay? Now, whenever you're trying to find an idea, it's okay to talk to friends and family and people close to you. However, when you're trying to validate it, when you're trying to see if people pay for it, don't ask your friends and family because they're going to be too nice to you and you're going to get a false positive, right? You need to talk to budget holders. You need to talk to interview decision makers. And you cannot talk to users unless you're creating a B2C application. I'll talk more about this later on. Keep that in mind. So once again, write this down. Validation requires unbiased economic intent, okay? If you understand these 5 words, you will never have to worry about validation again. This is the biggest truth when it comes to validation. It requires unbiased economic intent. So not from family and friends who want to be nice to you, unbiased economic intent. Number 3, hypotheticals, okay? Don't ask people, oh, would you use something like this? Or, oh, would you pay for this? Because that's just going to invite people to lie to you. Nobody wants to be a complete a-hole, right? People are going to be polite. That's how society taught us to be, okay? What you need to ask is more about the past. As Einstein said, if you want to know the future, take a look at the past. So ask people about the past. For example, tell me about the last time this happened and ask about the specific costs. So keep in mind, past tense questions only. And the reason we're doing this, by the way, if you might ask, is because if people have not spent any amount of time or money in trying to solve this particular problem in the past, there's a very low likelihood that they're going to spend time and money with you to solve the same problem. That is why we want to know what they did in the past to validate that what we do for the future will actually come to fruition, okay? Number 4, vanity metrics. So a lot of people might take a look at something like traffic, page views, or likes and social hype and think, wow, this is crazy. The most recent example of this was with the interview coder stuff, right? It went extremely viral on X, and a lot of people thought, wow, this is a crazy business. But then the founder actually had to pivot it because they were spending way too much money and they were not profitable. So they were bringing in revenue, but they were not profitable. That's because it's a vanity metric. The only thing that matters, once again, is people giving you money, okay? So people paying or pre-ordering, at least giving time to you because time is money, right? Or sharing data that you can use to improve what it is that you're doing. Ignore every single vanity metrics. Track every single behavior that actually produces revenue. And Lucas, they did spend money because all those clippers, everybody making these photo shoots, all these videos, that requires money and time, right? So that's not completely for free, especially coming from a content creator myself. I know how much time and energy they spent on that and how much money. Mistake number 5, overbuilt MVP. Now, I'm going to spend more time on this because this is literally the number 1 problem I see. And for some reason, people don't learn from their mistakes. This is the one problem I've seen that continuously appears and appears and appears. People keep making this mistake. Software engineers take months to build a product, polish the UI, add a bunch of features without yet even testing if anybody's going to want to buy it, okay? You need to move away from that. You need to create the smallest thing possible, deliver the first value, ship it in days, not spend months on it, and then build as you learn based on iteration. This is when we're talking about a SaaS in particular, but the same thing applies to a service. I'll get into it later, okay? Now, we talked about what we shouldn't do. So let's talk about how to actually validate, okay? First, if you remember the core principle from before, do not build a product. Build a test. Even better, sell it as a service. We're going to call this an MVP or an MVS, a minimum viable test or a minimum viable service. You might be familiar with an MVP, minimum viable product. We are moving away from that. We are not creating a product just yet to validate our idea because we can validate our idea without having to create an MVP. Let's talk about how we're going to do that. We're going to do that what's called the MOM test principles. I know it sounds a little funny, but bear with me. The MOM test principle pretty much states 3 things you need to be able to validate properly. And those 3 things are as follows. First and foremost, you want to talk about them being the target customer. Talk about their life and not your idea. You need to understand their current reality before you even try to pitch anything, okay? Next, you want to ask about their past, okay? Ask about the last time the same exact thing happened to them, that specific problem. And you want to get very specific with it. Understand the real costs and any other alternatives they tried. And you want to seek commitment. So not compliments, not, oh, that sounds cool, oh, I would pay for it. Actual commitment, either through time, money, or data. And in terms of the order you want to go into, it's money first, then time, then data. Now, understand one thing in particular. Once again, the core rule. If the person you are trying to sell to has not tried to solve the problem themselves, they most likely, 99% of the time, will not pay you to solve it, okay? You need to drill this in your brain. Write this down multiple times if you have to. If you are trying to sell, pitch anything to somebody, and they have not tried to solve that problem on their own before, or they haven't looked for a solution, the chances of you being their first sort of gateway into it are going to be very, very low. Okay? So how do we actually find that out, though? What type of interview questions do we ask people to understand that? And yes, try to solve, pay to solve before. Yes. So Lucas, it can either be they've paid to solve it, or they've at least gone out, hopped on a few sales calls, tried something to seek a proper solution for it. Investing time also implies. So let's talk about the interview questions. How do you actually go about this? What questions do you ask people? Well, ask them stuff like, when's the last time it happened, right? When was the very last time you encountered this problem? Walk me through the day-to-day, the step-by-step. What specific events triggered this problem? And where were you, and what was the context of this problem occurring? Identify their current workflow. How are they currently solving it right now? Are they using any tools, spreadsheets, or any hacks involved? Who else touches this process before or after them? And what's the most painful step in that workflow? Understand the frequency and the cost. How often does it happen, right? Daily, what's the cadence like? How much time or budget does it cost, right? And what happens if they don't change anything? And ask about the alternatives tried. Have they tried this before? What happened? Did it fail? Did it succeed? What did they not like about it? And why do they even have these alternatives in the first place? Why haven't they fixed it yet? Why haven't they come up with a full-on solution? Now, in order to understand this a little bit further, we're going to take a look at what's called the validation dashboard. Anytime you are asking these questions, anytime you are talking to people, in your mind, remember 3 things. Go, pause, and stop, okay? Go means you go ahead and build out the minimum viable test to get a paid offer for it. Pause means you have to rework your current offer / idea. Stop means you completely cut the idea. So let's take a look at what actually this means in the grand scheme of things. So you would stop something when, let's say you've done plenty of outreach. Let's assume 50 warm outreaches in your network, right? You haven't had any meetings booked, and people have only told you pretty much like, no, I don't think I want to do this. Kill that idea and move on. It is simply not worth the effort, okay? Now, when it comes to a pause, if you've done the same outreach and you have high interest, so people are at least complimenting it, or remember, giving you time, so they're meeting, right? They're meeting with you, but there's been zero conversion to any concrete action. They haven't given you money. Try to rework your current idea and offer a risk reversal to see if they'll at least pay you something, okay? And if you have made any money from the idea that you've pitched, or you've had meaningful conversions on at least 1 in 5 people, if not more, that is kind of like your go sign. Okay, this thing is validated. I need to bulldoze this. So you start with your MVP or your MVS, and you try to get a result out of it. To kind of break this down, the way this would look like is as follows. Let's say I'm taking a look at something, okay? And I'm trying to see, do I have a buyer and do I have intent? If I don't have a buyer right now for my idea, then I need to pivot, okay? I need to pause, and I need to take a look at something and understand that, wait a minute, I'm going to stop this entirely. I'm going to boot this idea, throw it in the trash, and I'm going to go back to the basics, and I'm going to find a very specific idea, okay? Next thing, if I take a look at something and I do have a buyer and I do have intent, that's my goal. I'm going to double down. I'm going to move to price negotiation and pilot execution, and I'm going to get started immediately because speed is money, right? Time is money. And if I'm kind of like in the middle, I don't know for sure if they're going to buy, and they're showing a little bit of interest, but there's no action. They're responding to me too late. They don't sound as enthusiastic, but I can tell they're somewhat interested. Well, I'm going to reframe what it is I'm doing. I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a look back, and I'm going to see, okay, they have high interest, but something's holding them back. What is holding them back? Let me add urgency, or let me add a guarantee or a risk reversal to get them on that go side, okay? This is the decision tree you want to follow. Just 3 things, either go, pause, or stop. Now, I want to give you a couple case studies on what this validation looks like in real time. And these are actual real pilots that have been done, real transcripts and real decisions based on myself and one of our founders inside Code2CO. So the first one I'm going to bring up is essentially one of the case studies with A/B analytics that we did. So basically, long story short, we were working with a freight company. This freight company were getting a lot of calls that they were missing. They got too many rings on their phone line, and they did not have enough people to answer them. Now, the intervention that we were going to introduce was obviously an AI voice agent to handle the low priority phone calls, and when they become high priority, we would transfer them to an actual person. And the outcome we were hoping to achieve was an extra 40% in revenue per month, and the asking price was going to be, well, we'll do a 75-day pilot plus 5% revenue share. And when I say risk reversal, I mean something that will help them reverse the risk. I'll get into it in the Q&A. So let's take a look at the transcript on how this call kind of went through. I asked, okay, walk me through the problem right now. What's sort of your biggest bottleneck, right? They told me, well, we post a load, and we start getting hundreds of calls in a span of a few hours, and we lose out on so much money. And I'm like, oh, wait. They specifically mentioned money. How much money, right? Like, have you tried to fix this before or no? They said, well, we could be doing an extra 40% in revenue. And yeah, we use call centers, but that opened up a new can of worms. So I immediately understood, okay, I have a green flag here. They confirmed they tried to solve the problem before, meaning they will most likely pay me if I have a good solution for it. And since they tried to solve the problem before, it opened up a new can of worms. I know they're a little emotional because they don't want to deal with the same exact BS they went through before, okay? So then what I do is I ask them, well, if I can handle all the calls with the appropriate time frame, and we can get you that extra 40% in revenue, do you think it would be fair for us to take a percentage of that revenue? So what I did now is I anchored the price, okay? I anchored the price to the outcome, in this case being 40%. So if anybody's looking at this from a logical sense, if you tell me, Bigo, you're going to make 40% more money, and all I'm going to do is take 5% of that, do you think that's fair? I'm going to be like, well, obviously. Like, if you get me extra 40%, I'll give you even 10% if you want it, right? And he said, if you can get me that extra 40% in revenue, no strings attached, yes, I will be fine with giving you a percentage of that. And when he said I will be fine giving you a percentage of that, he didn't explicitly say 5%, right? But he gave me the confirmation that, okay, he is willing to pay. And we moved to the pilot immediately, okay? The same exact thing happened with Demir as well, with the construction industry that he was working on. He knew the problem, right? He knew what the problem was. He knew that that individual spent money and time on trying to solve that problem for, and all he had to do was do a simple ask. If I can get you these results, do you think it would be fair for me to take this much, right? And that's moved on. That's how you validate, okay? So now let's talk about the fourth pillar. This is particularly for software engineers as well. And this is when it comes to users versus buyers and features to outcomes. The biggest trap that most software engineers fall into once they've already kind of passed the validation phase is they build for features, but they do not understand that people do not buy features, people buy outcomes. It does not matter if your feature is cool, it only matters if it creates an outcome for somebody, okay? Because here's the truth, users do not pay, buyers do. If your user ends up being your buyer, then all the more power to you. But most often than not, that is not the case, okay? Let's understand the difference between them. The user, right, lives in the product daily. They look for a seamless workflow, they look for a good user experience, they look for speed and efficiency. But the buyer who actually owns the budget and owns all the risk, they care about the ROI, they care about the business value, they care about the risk and compliance, they care about the switching costs, and they care about any political capital as well. They have different goals. Understand that. Write this down. And you must always solve for the buyer first. Prioritize the buyer's goals first and then the users. Only caveat is if it's obviously a B2C, but we'll get into it later. Now, when you get this backwards, it costs you literal years. This is the same exact reason you see software engineers building out crazy niche, amazing software that nobody ends up buying, okay? Because they did not validate the buyer first, and that's what you have to do. So let's understand who our users are, right? Our user can be somebody like the daily operator. So somebody that cares about speed, workflow. Our user could be more like a champion or a power user, right? They're heavily invested in an outcome. They'll advocate for you internally, but rarely have signing authority for the budget. So this can be somebody that really likes what you do or what you're offering. It's going to go to their boss and try to convince them to buy from you. It can also be the admin. So somebody who manages the permissions, setup, and maintenance. They care about ease of management, not the core value prop. This is critical. All of these guys can have different pain points, but none of them control the budget, okay? So you have to target the buyer. You have to know who your buyer is. And there's 3 different types of buyers. You have the economic buyer, so the one who actually releases the funds. This could be the CEO or the founder or the co-founder or the CFO, right? They care about the ROI, the bottom line, and why pay now. You have the budget owner or the VP. So somebody with executive P&L responsibility. They own a specific problem you solve and the budget line item. And then you, of course, have the approver. So this is legal, finance. They don't particularly buy, but they can stop the deal. They're going to own the risk, compliance, and procurement. Most businesses you talk with might not have this approver there, or the approver might be the economic buyer, but every single business will have at least one of these, okay? So you have to understand who is the buyer you're talking to. Once you understand who it is, everything else becomes so much easier, okay? Once again, user cares about speed, usability, better workflow. A buyer cares about the business case, time to value, right, integration costs, all these other things. Actual outcome-based things. Align with the buyer always. This is why I say do not build anything out until you have validated it. Now, when it comes to B2B, right, and B2C, things are a little different now. Because a B2C user, it's a very emotional, impulsive purchase, right? It's out of habit and convenience, and it's more about price sensitivity. But for a B2B user, right, it's more about ROI, it's more about risk mitigation and these things. So do not sell to companies using consumer psychology, okay? Once again, do not sell to businesses using B2C consumer psychology. You can still have emotion and impulse in there, you can have habit and convenience, but don't make that your main point. For example, trying to sell a dating app, right, a B2C-oriented thing to B2B aspect, it's not going to work, just not going to work, because a dating app literally only works on emotion and impulse and the convenience of it, okay? It's not going to work in a B2B environment, so understand that. This is generally the same persona that I like to follow myself, and I always recommend everybody to kind of have down, is who is the buyer, their role, their title, right, their top 3 pain points, and the objections that they're going to have. You also want to understand the budget source. Where is it coming from? Where's the money going to come from, right? Any specific KPIs, what do they actually care about? Do they care about the time aspect? Do they care about the money aspect? Any must-have integrations with whatever you're doing, right? Who's going to be the renewal? Oftentimes, the person buying it is not going to be the one that's going to renew it, right? The triggers. So what's going to cause them to actually go ahead and buy from you? And as well as the alternatives. Who are your competitors? Now, for most of you, some of these might not be immediate, like it might not be obvious what it is, but at least have these 3 over here. So the role, the top 3 pains, and objections, okay? Let's talk about now the journey map of what it looks like when you have something for the user and the buyer. Now, the user feels pain, right? So searches for a hacky workaround or a tool, okay? This is their awareness stage. The buyer realizes that, wait a minute, this problem costs me money, okay? So the user decides to test a free trial. They decide to validate features and the UX workflow. And the buyer tests the risk assessment of it, okay? This is their evaluation phase. The user reaches out to the buyer, says, hey, I think this is good to go. And they wait for access, but this is blocked by the approval of the buyer. The buyer at this stage decides, do I proceed with this or do I not proceed with this? And if they sign the contract, it moves on to now deployment, right? The user onboards, the buyer does rollout comms. Whenever it's time to renew, right? The user already uses the tool pretty much on a day-to-day basis, and then the buyer does an ROI analysis on it and decides, was this worth it? Was this not? I'm going to renew, okay? This is true for both SaaS and services, and I'll explain down the line, but understand this journey. Now let's talk about pricing, okay? Now, validation without pricing is simply going to be hoppy, and I'm going to talk about start with service pricing and not SaaS tiers, okay? I will bring up the SaaS example so you can see, but my main focus is going to be on a service setting. Let's get straight into it. Now, let's understand what actually makes somebody pay, okay? What gets them to put down their credit card? What gets them to send you that money, okay? It's 3 things. Either you impact their top of the line, so revenue, money, okay? Does your solution help them close more deals, increase conversion rate, expand, make more money? What does it do in terms of money? Number two, time or cost, okay? Any operational efficiencies, do you save them time, right? Do you bring down their cost? Time and money right now are the two things. Then risk, okay? Can you do these things? Can you impact their money? Can you impact their time while at the same time making sure that there is little to no risk? This is what actually makes somebody pay. And if you do all of this correctly, if you do a proper outcome, you tell them your revenue is going to go up or your cost is going to go down, and they're not going to have any friction. There's going to be no migration pain, right? There's going to be no friction, and the perceived risk is little, right? It's zero. They will be very willing to pay. Now, what determines how much they pay you? Well, that's going to be determined on these things, right? For example, if my outcome is really good and there's going to be no switching cost, but there's going to be a little bit of a downtime, or I'm just not a trustworthy individual, they have some risk there, this is going to bring down the total value. So if this was 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, this will go down to, let's say, 0, and now we have 20,000 instead of 30,000 we could have gotten. Now, this can be negative as well. These numbers could be negative. This is why, even though the offer might be really good, right, and there might be no friction, people will still not pay you because the risk is way too much. It's actually net negative for them. So whatever you do when it comes to pricing, always remember to tie that metric to the buyer, okay? Because depending on how good these three things are, that's going to unlock more budget. So when people tell you they don't have money or they don't have as much money, understand this formula, something didn't add up, okay? Try to see what didn't add up and then go back to them. Now, I'm going to give you a couple experiment scripts that you can use, and these are going to fall into what are called the pilot, the decoy, the verbal, and the value, okay? And each one does something unique: a risk reversal, a guiding choice, a logic cell, or a reframing. And I'm going to give this to you from a service as well as a software, okay? So let's assume we're taking a look at the pilot fee one, and we're taking a look at it from a software perspective. So you can say, like, our annual license starts at $24K a year, but let's do a 90-day pilot for $2,500 to prove the ROI first. If we hit the KPIs, we can then later roll into the annual. Does that de-risk it for you? So essentially, you turn something that's a yearly commitment of $24K into saying a 90-day $2,500 extreme discount, and only if it works do you then move on to the next stage. Okay, so this de-risks the process. In a service, you can say our retainer is, let's say, $5K a month, but let's do a 2-week sprint for $2,500 to prove that we deliver first. If the results are good, they're going to speak for themselves. We'll continue. If not, we don't have to. Fair enough, right? Once again, a risk reversal. You then have the decoy tier. So a lot of you guys might have already seen this happen to you, and you'll actually see it in real time. So let's say you have 3 plans on the software: the basic, the growth, and the scale, right? And then the service, same exact thing: the audit, the build, and the embed. What most people will do is tell you, oh, the basic has this one, the growth has this one, the scale has this one, the most popular is this. You'll see it a lot in software landing pages. They have like 1, 2, or 3, and then they have most common or recommended as the growth one, the middle one. They'll always do this. They'll make the first one really cheap. They'll make the last one really expensive. So naturally, the middle one looks quote unquote normal, where in reality, the normal is in reality what they wanted to get out of you anyways, and anything else they get is just an extra win, okay? Then you have the ROI calculator one. This is basically where you break it down into numbers. So you said this eats up, let's say, 15 hours over the week. That's about 3K a month. Our tool automates it for $200 a month. It's going to pay for itself in the first week. Or in a service, you said onboarding takes 20 hours per client. That's 3K in unbillable time. We build a system that cuts it into 3 hours. One client covers our fee. Kind of makes it like a no-brainer. Next is the value anchoring. So in the software, you can say, don't compare this to a $50 a month tool. Compare it to an $8,000 a month contractor doing it manually. We handle 80% of that work for only $300 a month. This literally comes down to a rounding error compared to the 8K a month, right? Less than 1%. Service-based, you can say, don't compare our fee to an Upwork freelancer. Compare it to getting this wrong. If you waste 3 months, that's over 30,000 burned, and our 5K engagement eliminates that risk completely. So there's a few ways that you can frame these pricing experiments, and a better way to do that is to kind of be familiar with the objection matrix. There's really 3 objections that you're going to get when it comes to pricing. One, they're going to say the price is too high. And what it really means is they see the expense, but not the investment. So the ROI is unclear for them. So what you need to do is kind of move towards more of a return on investment pricing negotiation tactic. So instead of saying, instead of kind of giving them the price up front, you say, if we prove 10K a month value during the pilot, does a 2K cost make sense? You want to make it so they'll feel stupid if they say no to that, right? They might say, oh, well, I know somebody else is doing this at half the price, right? This is a commodity trap. They're comparing the features and not the outcomes. So you want to shift to more of a total cost of ownership. So let's say, let's compare the cost of fixing their errors versus our 99% accuracy. What you want to do is make it seem like even though they're saving money initially, they are going to down the line lose money. They might say we have no budget this quarter, which means they don't think the problem is urgent enough. Okay, they don't actually see the ROI on it. So what you do is you want to shift towards the cost of inaction. What does it cost you not to solve this for another 3 months? This is simply a formula. Okay, similarly to how you guys understood algorithms, right? Similarly to how you understood big O notation. Same exact thing here. Apply the same concept. These are formulas in your mind that you memorize once, right? And you apply it depending on the situation. And it's textbook every single time. Oh, your price is too high. Okay, they don't see the investment. They don't see the ROI. Let me make it a no-brainer for them. Same exact thing. You apply it time and time again. Now, more specifically, if you want to see what this looks like, right? You'll get hit with, oh, this is too expensive. Then you want to ask, okay, is the price relative to budget, or are you not seeing the 10x ROI? If it's the ROI, let's take a look at the model again. If the budget is a constraint, we can remove something to bring the pilot under your cap, right? Essentially, you always want to work with people. You always want to see what you can do, but ideally, you want to make sure that the objection is first and foremost a proper objection, and not them thinking the ROI is unclear, or them comparing features and not outcomes, okay? That's the fundamental thing we want to take a look at. I'm not going to go to the rest of these. You can really quickly just take a look at them, but we already discussed them, right? We'll save it more time for the Q&A later. Now, When do we walk away? Okay, this is another mistake most software engineers make, is they don't walk away. And I made the same exact mistake when I first started. I took on so much free work and so many lowball offers just because I wanted to take the money, right? So when to walk away? This comes down to pricing discipline. Now, if somebody does not discuss the price at all, they are not a buyer. Walk away, cut them off, okay? If somebody says, oh, I don't have the budget right now, maybe next year we can purchase from you, deprioritize it. Don't cut them off, but deprioritize it. Put them in your CRM and say, okay, this person I'll reach out to in a few months, but I'm not going to spend any time and effort on them right now, okay? If somebody demands free access indefinitely, this is a simple, pretty much, we call them, well, I don't want to use a term for it because it's not a little appropriate, but we essentially don't think of these people as too kindly. They just want to come, use free stuff, and then leave, right? Leeches, basically. You cut them off immediately. Then you'll be met with people who have zero access to a budget holder. So this is oftentimes, when it comes into user versus buyer, you'll talk to a user, but they have no access to a budget holder. It's going to be a dead end. Cut them off as well, okay? You need to be familiar with pricing discipline because it's going to save you so much time and headache down the line. I did not do this when I was starting off, and I just wish somebody told me to do this before, and I would have saved so much headache, okay? Now, when it comes to pricing discipline as well, I want to talk about Ian, one of our Co2CO founders. He used this exact same tactic, and he ended up landing a very peculiar project. I'm not going to get into the details of it because I'm pretty sure he wouldn't want me to share it, but he got $10,000 from it simply by just asking for it, okay? He anchored the price, and the guy didn't even get back and say, no, I want to do it. They didn't even negotiate. They just said, okay, send the money immediately, just like that, okay? So this thing, this exact method of pricing does work. You just have to do it, okay? Now, we're moving on to pillar 6, okay? The shift from execution to ownership. So this is the most fundamental part. We talk about a lot of specific concrete things. It's a lot of action-based stuff we have to do. But what's the mindset that's going to require us to do this on a consistent enough basis? And myself as a founder, what's different from me now back when I was working at 9 to 5? Well, let me showcase that. The biggest difference is what I call the ownership ladder, okay? If we take a look at the ownership ladder, it's composed of 5 stages. We have level 1, the task. We have level 2, the project. We have level 3, the outcome. We have level 4, the customer result. And we have level 5, the profit and loss, okay? Whenever you are an employee, you don't really go above level 2. You even get to level 2 when you become a manager. So when I became a manager, closest I got to was level 2, but I never really got to level 3 as an employee, okay? Maybe once you make partner for that specific company, you can get to level 3, but you for sure don't care if the customer succeeded whenever you're just writing code, right? You don't even take a look at that. So what you have to understand is that as an employee getting into entrepreneurship, right, as a soon-to-be founder, you have to start operating at the level of 4 and 5. Move away from the technical and try to understand if what you are doing actually impacts the business in terms of revenue, right, and actually impacts the customer getting the result. You need to obsess over this. Just how a lot of you obsess over the technical details, you need to obsess over this ownership ladder. This is what's going to get you to be successful in business. Understanding this ladder and being extremely obsessed with level 4s and level 5s, okay? Now, how do I actually pick an idea? So me, a founder now, compared to me, an employee before. Now, me, an employee before, I would probably say, oh, I'll build this because I already know the tech stack, right? This idea is good because it lets me use my React and Python skills and I can brush up on them and I can get even better in them. And I was thinking, okay, I need a complete roadmap before I can start executing it. So I'm going to build everything out first and then start selling. However, now, the way I approach things is, okay, I'm going to pick this because I have a unique insight that others lack. I have a specific advantage over others. I can pick up the phone and call 10 potential buyers for this tomorrow, right? And this is the quickest way for me to validate if the problem is real before I spend any amount of time in building this. There's a fundamental shift in how we approach problems and ideation, okay? That's what you have to adopt. An employee, remember, focuses on tasks, always seeks permission, and fears being wrong. A founder optimizes for learning, whereas an employee optimizes for certainty because you are always afraid of the yearly reviews, being fired, so you have to optimize for certainty. But a founder, you optimize for learning. You don't care if you make mistakes because you know every single mistake you make, that's going to get you closer to perfection, right? It's feedback loop. And you always test for the truth. Is this thing a good idea? Am I validated, right? You don't seek permission from anybody, you do your own thing, and you focus on outcomes. So shift from asking for permission to actually testing things yourself. This is the biggest kind of context which you can make. A lot of you, up until now, have kind of essentially waited for permission from your managers or somebody to give you a jury ticket to give you a problem to solve. You need to get into the habit of doing things for yourself, right? It's sort of like the first time you moved out of your parents' house. Becoming independent, doing your own laundry, cooking your own food. Same exact thing with a business, except different analogy, right? So in terms of time allocation, this is something most people don't talk about. Let me talk about my own time allocation as a business owner on the amount of time that I spent when I started off. So majority of my time, half my time, which was the highest leverage thing I could be doing, was spent on validation, talking to customers, conducting interviews, testing different offers, testing different prices, A/B testing to see which one increased the conversion rate, which one didn't. That was the majority of my time. That's what I did. That's what allowed me to understand my customers better, and that's what allowed me to make a lot more money. The second thing, about a third of my time, I spent on outreach, okay? So positioning my brand, the copy that I used, right, the marketing, all of that. And the least amount of time I spent on actually execution, on building stuff. Now, I almost spent, I would say less than 5% of my time totally spent on building. Okay, the only time I build is if I'm testing something new or a new AI thing comes out and I want to test it myself, if I outsource it to somebody else, or if I think it's something that only I can do. Right now, for me, building is the least leveraged thing I could be doing. The highest leveraged thing for all of you as well is to talk to people, validate, interview people, understand the pricing, as opposed to building. Because 1 hour spent in here, in this highest leverage zone, can be equivalent to literally tens, if not hundreds of hours in this execution zone. What I mean by that is, simple example, pricing, okay? A lot of people, a lot of software engineers price based on time. And we just talked about how you have to price based on value. So if a developer spends 20 hours building something at $100 an hour, that's $2,000, right? They'll think, if I want to make more money, I have to do more work. I have to execute more. So they'll increase the amount of time they work. Instead of 20 hours, they'll decide to do 40 hours to make 4,000. So they'll double the amount of money they made by working 2 times more. What if you jumped to the highest leverage zone, right? You conducted a little bit more research, you validated more, you talked more, you held more interviews, you did a pricing test, and you found out that the same person will pay you $200 an hour as opposed to $100 an hour, right? Considering we're doing hourly. That's what I mean. You will not spend an extra 20 hours figuring that out as opposed to working the extra 20 hours to make double the money. It is just, I don't even know the right way to describe it, just crazy when you think about the disproportionate returns you can make if you spend most of your time on higher leverage activities. Understand that even though you're a software engineer, your entire life you build stuff, the least leverage thing that you can do is build. Yes, this is true even if you don't have a team. This is true if you're solo. The least leverage thing that you can do is build, okay? The highest leverage thing is talking to customers, right? Validating, conducting interviews, doing pricing tests, actually getting money, and building is the least amount of leverage. Understand that. I cannot stress this enough, okay? Now, let's talk about what a weekly calendar would look like for a founder, okay? As mentioned before, employees optimize for certainty, right? Founders optimize for learning speed. We want to have as many feedback loops as possible to learn as quickly as possible. So it's not that it requires time for us to learn something or to get good at something. It's the feedback loops. And these feedback loops can, let's say, take 1 day or 5 days, depending on the person, right? So that's what we have to do. The way I set up, generally when I was starting off my feedback loops, it was a weekly cadence. So I would set a hypothesis for Monday, right? And then Tuesday to Thursday, I would conduct outreach, I would do tests, I would take on sales calls, so I would execute. And then Friday, I would make my decision. Do I go, pause, or stop? Saturday, based on that, I would do an analysis. So what broke, what did we learn? And then Sunday, I would prepare the next week's experiment. This is how I narrowed down my feedback loop into a matter of a week for any single big decision that I was making, okay? Now, in order to actually prioritize these action items, because you might be thinking, okay, but go, what actions do I prioritize then? Because you just told me execution is the lowest leverage. I'm a software engineer. I've executed my entire life. What do I do? Well, you want to take a look at this impact versus uncertainty matrix, okay? This little chart here. You want to avoid anything that is extremely uncertain and has low impact, obviously. And you want to, once again, avoid anything that has low uncertainty and low impact because it's just a time sink. You can outsource that to somebody else. What you want to focus on are high impact and low and high uncertainty. If it's high impact and low uncertainty, that's a quick win. You do it immediately. If it's a high impact and low uncertainty, that's where a majority of your time should be spent, okay? Because there's a high potential, but the outcome is unknown. You don't know what you don't know. So that's what the majority of your time should be spent in trying to figure out. If you can get a quick win, you get your quick win. But understand that the biggest opportunities always will lie in the most high impact situations. The reason goes high risk, high reward, okay? Now, we now have the complete system, okay? We literally discussed everything. We discussed from step 1 all the way to step 6. Let's bring it all together, okay? Let's take a look at what all the 6 pillars kind of do for us. We talked about the good versus bad idea, right? We talked about the ideation formula. We talked about validation for code. We talked about users versus buyers. We talked about pricing early, right? And we talked about the founder mindset. There's really 3 core truths that I want you guys walking out of here with. Number 1, you ignore people's opinions and you optimize for their behavior. You don't target the users, you target the buyers. And you don't focus on building, you focus on validation. If you are not talking to buyers about money, you are not building a business, you are building a side project or a hobby, okay? Understand these 3 core truths. Write them down if you have to. And I want you to imagine 90 days from now, right? This is where you could be. Right now, on the most conservative scale, let's say this takes you 90 days to do, which, by the way, everything we discussed can be done in a matter of weeks, right? You map your advantage, you found your target buyer, right? You've done the calls, you validated the pain, you launched the MVP, you went to press go on it, right? You signed your first pilot, the first check clears, now you're building for a consumer base, and you have freedom unlocked. Only takes 90 days, okay? But here is the thing, okay? You have the system, but there's going to be a gap, obviously. There's going to be an execution gap. And that brings me to why I am here today, right? That's why I built Code2CO in the first place, the world's #1 startup accelerator for software engineers. I want to talk about a few of the results that some of our founders got so you understand you can do this too, okay? There's one thing you take away this. You can do this because all these individuals were not special or 10x developers. Sandra went from 2 jobs being overemployed to 0 jobs now, making a living. Dom being over the mirror, go out and have all the resources you need. You just need to be resourceful enough to do it. However, with support, it's going to be done way faster, okay? The cost is you losing time doing it alone, pretty much. You have the knowledge, but you lack the execution, okay? And there's 3 pillars that really Code2CO.
Managing and growing your SOC 2 program is a journey. And there's 2 ways to travel. The manual way, filled with spreadsheets, screenshots, follow-ups, fatigue, and audit failures that kill sales conversations. And then there's Sprinto. Sprinto plugs into all the systems you're already using, so you can start collecting the evidence a SOC 2 auditor needs from day 1. With a centralized dashboard, you see risks early, remediate fast,
So it's been a few weeks now since OpenClaw came out, and I wanted to make this video to tell you how I'm personally using it as a professional software developer. I'm going to go through my setup, the model selection, the tasks that I'm getting it to perform, and most importantly, how I'm keeping it secure and how I'm thinking about it going forward in the future. Okay, let's dive in and let's start with my overall setup. So you have probably seen a lot of tutorials online of people showing you how to set up the Claude-bot or OpenClaw, and I can tell you because I've watched many of them myself, many of them are just wrong, or if you do set it up that way, you're going to have massive security vulnerabilities. Now, I already made a full tutorial on how to do this, but my particular setup is very secure. I have this on a virtual private server. You can see I'm SSH'd into this right now. I've set this up using something called Tailscale, which is a virtual private network that only allows traffic from my computer or IP address that I authorize. And I've added a firewall to this server and made sure that the Claude-bot or OpenClaw is only running on localhost so that it's not exposed to any external traffic. A lot of people set this up and they actually have their OpenClaw instance just listening on the public IP address of the server. That is horrible and very insecure. So in my case, because of how I've set this up, it doesn't appear in any scans. You can't ping it. You can't attempt to SSH into it. And it has a full blocking firewall on all traffic other than the traffic that comes from my particular computer. And that's the most important thing. You want to protect what's coming in. I've also set this up on another user that is not a root user. So you can see it's set up under the Tim user, which is a separate account with a separate password. So that it doesn't have access to all of the sudo commands and it can't tear itself apart, undo the firewall, all of that kind of stuff that you could do if this Clawbot was actually connected using the root user. Now, the last major part of this is that I have it connected using Telegram. You can see that I'm chatting with it right now. That is the main way that I interface with the agent or with the bot. I don't have any other integration connected to it in terms of being able to chat with it. And the reason I went with Telegram is because this to me is a little bit safer than connecting it to something like WhatsApp, where it kind of has your identity and your phone number, could maybe receive like a two-factor authentication code, for example. Telegram is an app I don't really use at all. So even if my Telegram were to get hacked for some reason, even though that wouldn't really happen here, it's not as big of a deal compared to something like WhatsApp. Now, one of the biggest issues that I realized when I started using this tool is that while it's super cool and you can run it 24/7, the model is really important. And if you connect this to a frontier model, it's literally going to make you go broke unless you do a ton of optimizations. So for a few minutes, I had this connected to Opus 4.5 before I checked the usage. And just in a few minutes, I had already spent a few dollars on the API, which was insane and put my burn rate at thousands of dollars per month. So I really quickly figured out a much more effective way to run this that's not quite as powerful, but that is 99% cheaper. And that is to connect it to a codex model. So you can actually connect this to your existing subscriptions and you can use your subscription quota rather than having to connect this to just an API key, which I found is a lot more expensive. So in my case, I pay for ChatGPT Pro. This is $200 per month, very expensive, but it gives you practically unlimited limits of their new codex model, which is very good at coding and developing. In fact, I'd say it's actually better than Opus 4.5 in a lot of different tasks and is still really capable at reasoning. It's not as good at as 4.5, but for 99% of tasks, it can achieve that and accomplish what you need. So you can see this is my usage so far using this for about a week. I'm not anywhere close to hitting my weekly usage. I'm not close to my daily usage, and I'm running this constantly. It's always running sub agents. It's always on. I have the heartbeat running all the time. So I would highly recommend that if you're going to be a power user of this, purchase something like the ChatGPT Pro subscription or the Plus or whatever, and just connect it to the Codex model, which again has really, really high limits. Now, at the same time, I also connected this to my Claude subscription, which I pay $20 per month for, so that I can get access to the Opus models when I need it to do some advanced planning. So I have two models connected to this, and effectively what I tell it is, hey, whenever you have a really complex task, go and use Opus 4.5, but then fall back to Codex for everything else. And if you run out of usage in Opus 4.5 or with the Claude subscription, then just go back to Codex. So having that has given me really good results and allowed me to have the benefit of this great kind of planning execution model with Opus, but also with all of the coding capability, which is most of the stuff that I'm getting this model to do. So overall, yes, this is expensive, but it's way cheaper than if I was running it through the API. And there's a lot of optimizations you can make to the tool to ensure that it doesn't use as many credits, although I'm not going to dive into all of that right now. So I'm now going to dive into my integrations as well as what I'm actually getting this model to do. But just a quick break is I want to tell you about boot.dev, which is one of the best learning platforms out there and one of my long-term partners. Now, one of the biggest problems that I see with people learning how to code is boredom. They watch tutorials, copy code, feel productive for a week, and then they quit. Now, boot.dev takes a completely different approach. It's very hands-on and honestly feels more like a game than a course. Now, you're learning back-end development by actually building things, not just watching videos. You work through real challenges in Python, SQL, and Go, earn XP.
Managing and growing your SOC 2 program is a journey. And there's two ways to travel. The manual way, filled with spreadsheets, screenshots, follow-ups, fatigue, and audit failures that kill sales conversations. And then there's Sprinto. Sprinto plugs into all the systems you're already using, so you can start collecting the evidence a SOC 2 auditor needs from day one. With a centralized dashboard, you see risks early.
So I used to be quite anti-AI. I used to think it was a bit of a gimmick. It's not really going to help with much. It's all hype, basically. But in the last few months, a lot has actually changed, and I've actually never felt so excited to use AI. And it's because of one tool, and that's Claude. To be fair, the same can apply to other AI tools, but Claude is just the one that I happen to be using. I first gave it a whirl back in September and used it for some basic stuff like building a photography website from a folder of photos. But over the last few months, things have gotten out of hand, and that's what's made it so exciting to use for me personally. By the way, I'll leave a link to my sort of stack that I'm using when it comes to building stuff, all the apps, all the softwares, my workflow and stuff. I'll leave a link to that if you guys are interested as well. I do want to give some background context though. I am not a developer. I don't aim to be a developer. I don't like coding really. I've done some coding here and there. but I'm no programmer. I feel like no way would I call myself a programmer. I see myself as someone who likes to use graphical user interface. I like visual stuff. It's why I consider myself a designer instead. But using Claude, I've started doing silly things that you probably shouldn't do, but I just feel like, I don't really care because I'm not doing it with anything that's too valuable. One of those things is SSHing into my VPS with Claude, giving it a prompt and then just letting it do its thing, which seems to be quite a common thing that a lot of developers are doing, because if you don't care too much about what's on the VPS or you're using a sort of test VPS or something like that, yeah, SSHing into it and just using Claude and letting it rip is some of the most fun. Half a year ago, opening the terminal would have felt like I'm hacking into the Matrix. It was just so intimidating. I've been designing web pages and stuff when people were just starting in apps like Photoshop. Now though, the terminal has become one of my favorite apps of choice for design, bizarrely. The great thing is, if you don't like using the terminal, Claude actually now have a sort of code tab in their Mac app, which lets you build stuff without having to use terminal. It just looks like a normal sort of chat prompting app. But let's go back a bit, because the first thing I wanted to do with Claude was to make a sort of Zapier make alternative. Yeah, I know, what the hell was I even thinking? Because building something like that is just absurd. Like, it's silly to try. However, Claude recommended using NA10. I'd never heard of NA10 before, and boy, I wish I had, because NA10 is essentially a sort of automation workflow platform that has superpowers. You can use it to basically automate anything and everything. And what drew me to it was that they have a self-hosted version, which is even better. I have full control over it, and I only pay for the hosting. After a lot of research and actually asking Claude, how should I host this thing? They recommended hosting it, which lines up perfectly because they're also sponsoring this video. NA10 is so popular that Hostinger literally have they recommended Hostinger, which lines up perfectly because they're also sponsoring this video. NA10 is so popular that Hostinger literally have a dedicated workflow for installing.
Managing and growing your SOC 2 program is a journey. And there's two ways to travel. The manual way, filled with spreadsheets, screenshots.
There is a new feature in NotebookLM, and when you combine that with anti-gravity and Gemini, you unlock superpowers. And not only is NotebookLM even more powerful, when you combine it with its new integration in anti-gravity, you unlock capabilities that most people don't even know exist. And in this video, I'll show you the NotebookLM and Gemini upgrades and 5 insane use cases for NotebookLM and anti-gravity so that you can save more time, make more money, and get light years ahead of your competitors. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Jack Roberts. I built and sold my last tech startup with over 60,000 customers, and now I run a 7-figure AI automation business. So if you haven't already, grab that coffee and let's dive straight in. NotebookLM just got huge upgrades. And not only can you now leverage these upgrades in NotebookLM, you can connect it to Gemini, its most powerful model in the Google family, and also Google's anti-gravity. Now, let's start with Gemini. So in Gemini, you can now actually chat with any of your notebooks in NotebookLM. And you can also leverage something called personal intelligence that lets Gemini understand whether you want to understand things about your email, your Google Drive. It's super powerful, meaning you can get personalized, wonderful insights. Then we have the NotebookLM itself. Now, you can actually create editable PowerPoint presentations from your notebooks now. You can download those. You can also vibe edit text, which I'm going to show you exactly how this works. And you can also do this in unlimited styles, and I'll show you some really cool hacks for that. However, anti-gravity creates insane use cases. You can create unlimited, as we know with anti-gravity. If you see my other videos, audio overviews, video overviews, infographics, slide decks, reports, mind maps, flashcards, and quizzes, all programmatically with anti-gravity when you connect it to NotebookLM, including, by the way, data tables. You can also now add personal intelligence when you're talking with anti-gravity and creating these notebooks in NotebookLM, because the big difference at the moment is it has to be you in NotebookLM. Anti-gravity lets the world's smartest models act on your behalf, understand things about you, and create better notebooks, extract insights, and even download them into your own actual anti-gravity environment, which is an actual cheat code. It's ridiculous. Now, also on top of this, we have a new skill where you can convert NotebookLM into PowerPoints, high-res slide images, interactive web slideshows, ready to download PDFs, and Google Slide reports, which I'm going to show you in this video. It's a skill that I created, and you can have it completely free. I'll put a link down below in the description for you. And not only that, the connection between NotebookLM and Google's anti-gravity is a one-time thing now. They've solved the authentication thing, so it's so easy, and you can even get shareable URLs for every single one of your notebooks. Now, before you can unlock the full powers within anti-gravity in Google's NotebookLM, you have to understand some of the crazy updates that just happened in NotebookLM. So we're going to cover those and how you can leverage Gemini, and then I'm going to show you 5 incredible use cases for NotebookLM and anti-gravity. So there's 2 incredible things to understand, 2 cool updates. Number 1, if you click on any notebook, you may or may not know this, for example, but when you're creating a notebook here, if I click on this, for example, you can see it's pulled it up, and this is 20 different sources from anti-gravity, which is wonderful. Now, typically speaking, you can download this as a PDF. You click on more options, you click on download. Now, in some accounts, not all, they're slowly rolling out the ability to download this as an editable PowerPoint. It's not ready on all accounts. I think it's starting in the US, but even if you don't see it, I'm going to show you how you can get these into PowerPoints anyway with a brand new anti-gravity skill. So that's number 1, which is wonderful. But what you might not know is that you can actually now come in and revise and change the images for any notebook you create within NotebookLM. Of course, at any point you want to, you can just click on this notebook feature over here. And what this will do when you click on slide deck, it will actually go ahead and create that for you. If you click on this arrow, for example, one of the things that you can do is describe the style that you want. So check this out. Let's say, for instance, that you were on a website that you like. So I don't know, we've got some really interesting designs on this page called Landbook, right? So let's say you had a look and I wanted something like presentations. What we can do is reverse engineer any design we want to feed into our style, right? So let's say that we like the vibe and style of, just as a for instance, let's pick this one at the top here, right? Let's go with these big, bold, blocky colors. Okay, very, very cool. What we can do is screenshot this like this, going to come down and we'll grab all of this and then clipboard and then head over to Gemini. Now, the reason we're using Gemini, and we'll come back to Gemini in a second, is because it's the best model on earth right now at what we call multimodal communication. So in terms of image and video, it's wonderful. So we're going to give it the following prompt. Hey there, Gemini. I would like you to extract from this image the core tenets of its brand philosophy, color scheme, vibe, typography, that kind of thing. Keep the prompt a maximum of 500 words. Hey Glido, improve this prompt. Now, the reason I'm getting Gladio to do this is because I just want it to be very detailed. And sometimes you don't have the time to sit down and do it. So the model's thinking about it. It's doing a little bit of magic in the background. It will give us now a full wonderful prompt that we can throw into Gemini. And then we highlight this. And there we go. We've got it all down there, which is just really good. It's brand philosophy, vibe, mood, typography, great stuff. Cool. So come down and then we're going to paste in the image and put image attached. Cool. And then send that one off. Fantastic. Now, what we can do when you come back over here. So I've got a slide deck on a random topic is you can actually describe the slide deck that you want to create. You can specify whether it's short, default, and long. And by the way, if this is all like common knowledge to you, feel free to skip ahead. I'll put the timestamps down below so you can get to the anti-gravity part if you like. But this is really worth checking out because it's such a cool feature. And then we've got all this information here from Gemini. We'll copy this and come back over. And once we paste that in, when we go for a little bit of a short one, this one to keep it nice and poppy. Again, presenter slides is a good one. It's clean visual slides with talking points. Let's go with presenter slides and keep it short. And we'll generate that one right there. And then we can see this being created for us on the right hand side. And whilst Notebook LM is building this, I want to go ahead and show you Gemini and what that physically looks like because you're going to find this fascinating. Now, I've come into Gemini and why don't we, for instance, create a brand new chat window? Okay, click on this one here. Now, here's a really cool thing. If you want to chat to any of your notebooks, here's what you can do. You can click on this plus and you see it's got various different files. We can click on Notebook LM. Now, bear in mind, Notebook LM can pull in hundreds and gazillions of different sources. So I've got this mastering anti-gravity. Let's add that in there. Maybe we also want to chat with building AI apps. Awesome. And then why don't we also take a look at something random that I built a while ago, a RAG masterclass. Okay, I click on add. Now, there's a fundamental difference to understand between Gemini and anti-gravity and Notebook LM that most people don't get. And the interesting thing, it's the thing that makes Notebook LM amazing, also holds it back. Notebook LM is almost like it has a RAG database, right? So it can store insane amount of information. But when you ask it questions, and this is so important to understand because on previous usage of it, you get way better results. It can only pull from the information and data that it's got, right? If I ask it, hey, is this guy blue? It will check the files to tell me that. It's what we call local, right? It's not global. It will look in books. The best analogy for this, if you speak to Gemini about these things, Gemini is a librarian who says, hey, you've got the information in this book, but I also happen to know information from several other books, and it'll give you an overview. Notebook LM will only tell you the stuff that's in it. So when we bring it over to Gemini or anti-gravity, we're getting more of a global overview. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So I can ask a question like, hey, dude, could you just give me 3 facts about anti-gravity, please? And as you can see, we've got back some stuff. So remember, the reason why this is great to do this in Gemini is Gemini can think iteratively. It can actually think and help you strategize. So I could say, awesome, if I were to do some content on anti-gravity, what are some of the common sort of topics and sub-niches that people might find valuable? So you can ask it things about this. You can talk to multiple notebooks at the same time. Whereas in Notebook LM, you can only talk to one, but in Gemini, you can talk to multiple. So that's a big feature and advantage of Gemini. Other cool thing, by the way, if you click on tools, in some accounts, I think you need to have a non-Workspace account for this, I believe, but you'll see something called personalized intelligence rolling out to people. And that basically will take your calendar, your email, even search history on YouTube. Dangerous topics, some might say, right? Who knows what channels are happening here? But it will use that as layered context to help improve its answers, which is crazy. And you can toggle that on and off on a per conversation basis. So if you don't see it here, it should be launching at a Gemini near you at some point soon. So you can see now we're getting stuff like this. Whereas if we ask the same questions to Notebook LM, we wouldn't get this level of reasoning. Gemini is able to think more literally, whereas in Notebook LM, what you're basically getting is just, this is what it said, blah, blah, blah. And guys, look at this design. This is ridiculous. If I click on play and stop the slideshow, you can see how it's really captured that brand essence. Anti-gravity, not just for your bestie, powered by Gemini 3.5. Vibe coding is dead. Long live professional deployment. This is crazy. And it's really captured that $2 suitcase, the anti-gravity strand. You don't care, you command. This is a really cool unorthodox thing. I love how it's done this. This is like actually ridiculous. 100% I would use slides like this. Maybe you'll see this in future videos because I'm super, super impressed with this. And then we got the Blast framework, JR Classic, which is cool, explains everything with detail. And so we can build this in your style. And the idea is we could screenshot this and have them as like bits that we go through and explain as with videos or whatever we want to, context raw, all of this stuff. Like this is actually just genuinely really, really impressive. But what we can do now is we can actually edit and get information. So if I click on this, for example, one of the things I can say, yes, we think it's good content, we love it, but we can actually edit this now. If we click on revise, I could say something like, hey, looks really cool, would love if the anti-gravity sign was just a little bit shorter so we could see all of it. And can you change it from a green to a yellow, please? And then what we can basically do is go down and add all of these amendments and suggestions. And how about this? Hey, dude, change that green to a yellow, please. Can you come down? We'll have a little think about it. We can come down here. I love this. How about remove the text from the bottom of the page? Whatever it is, right? We give all our specific instructions and then we click on generate a new deck and then it will reiterate. I mean, like how crazy is this that we can do this now with a Notebook LM? Wonderful. Now it's complete those changes. Let's check it out. Open anti-gravity standard, click on play and see if our feedback has been taken on board. So let's load up. Anti-gravity, it's changed it from green to yellow. It's changed the colors on this one as well. And it's removed the text at the bottom. Worked exactly as we suggested. So now you understand some of the powerful features in Notebook LM and Gemini. Now let's take it to a completely new level and cover 5 insane use cases when we connect this to anti-gravity. Now the first thing we need to do is connect it. Again, as always, I'll put all the resources down below so you can grab it, but we're going to go ahead and use this magic setup skill, which is very, very cool. So all you're going to do is going to come down. If you haven't connected already, just literally copy this information and then we're going to head over to anti-gravity. Of course, if you don't have anti-gravity, this video will make sense. Just go to antigravity.google and then download it. So we have anti-gravity open. We're going to create a brand new folder and we call this one Notebook Magic. So what we're going to do is connect anti-gravity to Notebook LM. Remember, Microsoft Excel is for numbers, Microsoft Word is for document, anti-gravity is for creating software and its capabilities are not matched by anything else. So then once you enter that in, you'll open up a brand new browser in Chrome and all you got to do is sign in and then it'll be authenticated. Now the cool thing here is that as you've seen with this one here, you're going to ask it a very simple question. And by the way, if you're struggling with this point at any point, I'll put a full guide on screen somewhere so you can click that, get ready to rock and roll and it kicks some butt. But the good news is one of the things that we've improved with this connection is now the fact that once you connect, it can automatically refresh the tokens, meaning you don't have to keep going back and signing in once you've done it to make it way, way easier. And you can see here, for example, looks like the authentication expired because we're authenticating in the browser. It just refreshes it and now it's ready to rock and roll. And you can validate that it's that by clicking on these dots, coming down to MCP servers, and then clicking over here, manage MCP servers. And then you'll see Notebook LM on the left-hand side, which will be right here. And we have 29 different features and skills that we can use now in anti-gravity. How freaking cool is that? And as you can see, it's pulled back the latest notebook for me, which is anti-gravity, AI web development, and automation systems. Now, use case number 1 is this idea that we can build these beautiful Alexandria's library of knowledge and then and query it in anything that we're building in anti-gravity. For example, I could say something like, hey, dude, just query this notebook and just give me 3 facts about anti-gravity, please. So what's a good example of a use case here? So say that you and I are running a business together, right? What we can do now is store, let's say, all of our HR policies on anti-gravity. And we know that it's safe there, and we could have 40 different documents in anti-gravity on our policies. And then let's say that we're building out our website. What we can do is actually reach over and leverage that knowledge within anti-gravity or any number of different notebooks within anti-gravity into our scenario here. Now, what's really cool is it doesn't burn the context window of Claude because it's all hosted within anti-gravity, and it can intelligently decide when and which ones to go ahead and grab. So you could do this for any number of things, any number of sectors for your business intelligence. Say, for example, we want to have a competitive intelligence notebook. So if we come over to Notebook LM together, so for example, if I come to create a new notebook, I could come over here and say something along the lines of speech-to-text startups, find me the best research out on intelligence, the best way to create them, infrastructure, customer acquisition, everything like that. So we can have these different things, right, which is really cool. And now we can spin up different notebooks, and then we can query these whenever we're building anything. So if I, for example, want to understand the best way of doing anything, we can, when we have that stored in Notebook LM, anti-gravity can basically pull upon those whenever it needs to for any particular kind of use case. And as you can see here, it can now pull down any single piece of information it wants to, and we can use that to create software, apps, or anything that we like. But you can take this one step further. So for example, you can have your own personal, what I call brain.md, that describes who you are and what you stand for. A little hack, by the way, you can add that over here in additional options. Come down to customizations, and you see over here you've got global. You can add in here global rules for anti-gravity about who.
If you're running Claude Code or really any coding agent, there will be some kind of init command. This promises to initialize a new Claude.md file or maybe an agents.md file with code-based documentation. I am going to recommend that you never ever run this. And if you find a Claude.md file or an agents.md file that you think has been created by an agent, delete it. The file that this creates will burn tokens, will distract the agent, and will go out of date faster than a pear on a hot day. This paper evaluating agents.md are repository level context files helpful for coding agents. This actually put this to the test, and what they found was we conclude that unnecessary requirements from context files make tasks harder, and human written context files should describe only minimal requirements. We'll get to what this means and what you should actually use Claude.md files for in this video. If you dig this kind of thing, then you should check out my newsletter where I post my new agent skills as I come up with them and test them. And I'm also working on a Claude Code course, which is going to be an absolute banger. But let's actually test this out and run init inside my work repository to see what happens. As a bit of background, this is a fairly large repo. It has a whole bunch of package.json scripts, a whole bunch of dependencies. It's a React router application with an effect backend, which is my favorite stack these days. And there is currently no Claude.md file in here, but let's initialize one and let's see what happens. We can see, by the way, it's doing a explore step here, and it's using Sonnet 4.6 for the explore. So what this is doing is it's calling a subagent and making that subagent explore the code base, and that subagent is going to report a summary back to the orchestrator agent, the parent agent. It's reading a bunch of files here, doing a bunch of searches, and just getting an overall sense of the code base. Now, this explore step is going to be something that the LLM does, or the agent does, every single time you do a piece of work. It needs to explore the code base before it can feel confident making changes to it. In fact, you can think of there as being a few main tasks that the agent does, or a few main ways that the agent uses up its context window. The first chunk of usage is going to be the system prompt, so anything that's inside the agent that it has access to on every single request. This will be things like
engineers, I've found the only true Claude Code competitor, and it's not what you think. Every single engineer is limited by the tools they use, because the tools you use shape what you believe is possible. So when's the last time you've asked yourself, how is my agentic coding tool limiting me? If you want to expand beyond what everyone else is doing, you clicked on the right video. You need new tools to expand what you can do. As the first viable agentic coding tool, Claude Code has changed software engineering. I love Claude Code. I was an early adopter, and I bet big on it. If you did too, you've been massively rewarded. But as you know, there are levels to this game, and every tool has limitations. Let's be real for a second. Claude Code.cancer. What do I mean by that? Successful products must grow to meet new profit motives. Remember, this is a for-profit tool. That means doing things that maximizes profit over user satisfaction. With growth, you also tend to serve the masses more and more instead of your original niche audience. For Claude Code, that means us mid to senior level engineers. You can see this happening in Claude Code month after month. Remember, Anthropic, Claude Code, it's a private company. They can do whatever they want. So we can complain, or we can put on our engineering hat and do something about it. In this video, I want to share a tool that engineers are starting to pick up more and more to help you hedge against Claude Code and break through the current limits of your agentic coding tool. This tool is the open source, unopinionated, customizable counterattack to Claude Code. Let's have a slice of pie. There are many coding agents, but this one is mine. The catchphrase says it all. Let me show you exactly what I mean by that. Here, you can see something incredible. These are all unique instances of the Pi agentic coding tool, customized for a specific purpose and a specific job. One tool, many versions. Let's start with a minimal slice of pie and work our way up incrementally, so by the time you finish watching, you'll know exactly how to customize your agentic coding tool down to the text color. Why am I calling Pi the only Claude Code competitor? How can this be true? How is this a counterattack on Claude Code? There are two big themes you're going to see as we work through this: open source and customizable. First, let me give everything away that we're going to talk about. If you're interested in these ideas, definitely stick around for the video. We're going to talk about the design philosophy between Claude Code and Pi, and then I'm going to share 3 tiers of Pi, increasing in capability. We're going to start with the basics of the agent harness, move to agent orchestration, and then finally move to meta agents. We're going to break down the obvious stuff that you need to know, and then we'll talk about prompt, context engineering, tools, hooks, and then the ultimate strategy for how to go about using these tools, not separately, but together. I think in ands, not or. The engineering world is too complex to pick single winners. And the ultimate theme here is we are hedging our agentic engineering. I've written thousands and thousands of prompts and thousands of agents with Claude Code. This isn't about picking one one winner. It's about picking the best tool for the job of engineering. So if these ideas interest you, stick around. Let's jump right in. We first have to talk about the design philosophy between these two tools in order to understand how they truly differ. So for Claude Code, as soon as you open this thing up, you have a great out-of-the-box default experience for agentic coding. The floor here has gotten really low. Any engineer and frankly, any PM, any designer, any vibe coder can jump into this tool and start getting value out of it. Now, Pi agent is very, very different. And the author, we'll talk about the author Mario in a moment here, but his approach here is very unique. If I don't need it, it won't be built. Okay. So already we have contrasting ideas in the philosophy of how this tool is built. All right. So let's talk about safety. So Claude Code, as you know, comes with like 5 out of the box modes. You have to confirm everything. This is a great start. It's a great on-ramp to agentic coding. But Pi agent says security in agentic coding is mostly theater. It's pointless. It's stupid. It actually slows down the true value of agents. I completely agree. There is no safety mode here unless you build one in, but by default, this thing has full access to your device. And so you can see already Pi agent is really leaning toward an engineer that knows what they're doing. System prompt, this is a big one. The engineers working on Claude Code, they've worked hard to create a 10,000 token prompt. They have a lot of good best practices and opinions baked into the system prompt. And I'm sure you've wondered this, is all that really necessary? Pi agent doesn't think so, okay? Pi agent says, we have 200 token prompt. Let's let the model cook. Let the model do what it does best, which is think, reason, and solve the problem. Next, we have observability. In Claude Code, more and more this tool has been abstracted away, right? It's like you don't need to know the exact tools. You don't need to know what's happening right now unless you dive into hooks, unless you really start digging into the engineering of it. Pi agent is a little different. This tool really has nothing to hide. In fact, it wants to surface as much to you as possible, is as useful, all right? And then here's a banger. As you know, Claude Code, again, for-profit company, great company, but it's all about profit. They are prioritizing the Claude models, right? They want you to use the Claude models, right? Thankfully, they're great. I prefer them over other models. Pi doesn't care. Pi wants you to use any model you want to solve the problem. So this immediately kind of changes the fabric of your agentic coding experience when it's any model versus specific models, all right? So let's just really, really dial into these raw differences. What does this mean as an engineer, okay? So you have closed source versus open source. We have the agentic coding leader with unique minimal approach. You have great out-of-the-box defaults, customizable to the core. And you saw that right here, right? As we work through these examples, you're gonna see exactly how you can dial into everything down to the font color. We're gonna move all the way up to powerful multi-agent orchestration, which is insane that you can, customize a tool to that ability, but Pi gives you that capability. We're gonna look at that in a second. Do it our way with some customization. We have to give Claude Code some credit. It is a decently customizable tool. Pi takes us a step further, right? If you don't like a new feature, disable it, overwrite it, or pin a version. Once again, open source always gives you that ability. You can just pin and forget. Here's kind of where things get tricky, right? With great defaults comes strong opinions. When Claude Code rolls out change, you can't really do anything about it. I'm not gonna add a feature flag for everything they roll out as much as some of us wish they would. As mentioned with Pi, you can just roll it back anytime you want. Use our models, disincentivize using others. Pi doesn't care. You can change anything you want. And last but not least here, we have programmatic support for both, all right? So this is super important. As we talk about on the channel, your agents must have programmatic support. This is how you move into out-loop agentic coding. This is how you build products with agents. And this is how you get out of the terminal. I think with the whole OpenClaw phenomenon, people are starting to understand why that's so important. It's so that you don't have to sit behind the terminal 24/7 and babysit your agent. So this is the raw difference between these two tools. Now this summarizes in the fact that Pi is really for the advanced engineer looking for that edge of customization and extensibility, while Claude Code is the best out-of-the-box agentic coding tool, all right? I think that's well known now. They're the leader in the space. They created the agentic coding space by putting together key ideas, specifically great architecture, a great agent harness, and models powerful enough to drive them. But things have changed. There are many models that can drive the agent harness now, and the secret or the trick of how to build great agent harnesses is out. Let's showcase some of Pi's capabilities, right? I'm really hyping this tool up. I want to present a balanced approach to the value proposition of Pi, because sometimes you are just going to want to reach for that out-of-the-box Claude Code and get the job done. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's start with the basics of the Pi agent harness. For our first slice of Pi, we're just going to use the out-of-the-box Pi. Okay, so I'm just going to type Pi, and you can see exactly what you would expect, right? A terminal interface opens up with a simple agent loop. We can type ping and get a response here. We have the thinking always exposed, and we have a nice footer or status line, as Claude Code likes to call it. And you can see here that we are using that new Claude Sonnet 4.6 model with thinking turned on to the max. Inside of Pi, you have all the standardized features that you would expect out of a powerful agentic coding tool. You can type / and you can see all the kind of default commands. We're not gonna go over these. These are all kind of table stakes, right? Fork tree, login, start a new session, compact, resume, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So these are all there. Those aren't interesting. That's not what we're gonna focus on. What we are gonna focus on is how you can take this to the next level and make this tool your own. Remember the catchphrase here. There are many coding agents, but this one is mine. Let's go ahead and close this version and let's start customizing our Pi. Everyone likes their Pi a different way. So we can go ahead and copy this one. So let's say that you're an engineer that likes to stay in the flow, right? You know the importance of staying in the flow, of staying focused. So we can use Pi-E, and then we can enable what's called an extension. So this is how you make Pi your own, right? This is how you cook your own Pi. Let's go ahead and copy this, paste it in, and now you can see something really cool. There is no other information on the screen in this terminal except for this bar. Okay, so now same thing, ping, and you can see the response. So, we don't know the model, we don't know the context, we don't care. I'm in the flow. I don't want to see anything, okay? So I just want to show you in a really blatant example of how customizable this is. You can rip out everything. So if you want to stay in the flow, you use this, and then it's just you talking with the model. The exact model you're using doesn't matter. Your context doesn't matter. Nothing matters, all right? Just you and the agent just flowing back and forth. What else can we do with this tool? Being purely focused in the flow isn't always going to get you a concrete result. You do want some information to know what model you're running and how much context you have left. So we can run something like this. And the great part about Pi, notice this, is that I'm stacking extensions. So I'm now going to put together 2 extensions in one. Very cool. So I'm going to copy this line, paste it in, and you can see here, we have our own customized footer, Claude Sonnet 4.6, and we have our context window on the right. Okay, so same deal, ping, ls. We can queue up message standard convention where we can set where we want to load the components of your powerful agentic coding tool. So you can see here, it's picking up all of my custom global skills, 41 skills, but also in this directory, you can see we have a classic /prime command. And you can see I picked up a bunch of agents as well. And so out of the box, you can already start to see how we're starting to customize this agent, right? We're deciding where it loads the key pieces that make it. Right away, as soon as I boot it up, it's asking me a question. What is the purpose of this agent? So I'll type explore and discover this code base. I'm mixing and matching these different capabilities of my customizable agent via an extension. Remember, there are many coding agents, but this one is mine. I love that slogan. Okay, so tool counter, right? Let's just keep customizing what we can do with our fully customizable agent, right? So let's try this off, and you can see here we have a new footer. So we can type ping. There it is. So as you would expect, we have a context window with the model. We have our code base name with the branch, and you can see something cool here, waiting for tools. Okay, interesting. Why is it waiting for tools? Let's type prime, and now as our agent runs, it's going to record the exact tools that it's been running. Another just kind of nice feature out of this tool, you can kind of build in whatever customizations you want to have around your status line, or as Pi calls it, the footer. You can, really customize it to make it your own. We have the tokens in and we have the tokens out here. So again, the footer is just one location, right? A lot of agentic coding tools, they have support for you to modify the footer, but we can do much better here. This is Pi. Let's go to this counter widget, and I'm actually going to just add another extension here to kind of showcase this. I'm going to add the theme cycler feature, and we'll show that off in just a second. I'm going to copy all this, fire off my customizable agent, and now we have a couple different things going on, right? We have that classic footer, and we have a widget, and we can cycle our theme. So let me just put something on the screen here. I'll just type ls. I just want to showcase more of the UI here. Okay, ls, no response. So you can see my key clicks here. And so check this out. First off, you can see we have a widget here, tools 2, and you can see the actual commands that we ran. If I do Control X, just like you saw there, I can update the theme. I think Claude Code comes out of the box with like 4 themes or something. I created all these themes, right? So I have, you can see here 13. I'm cycling through 13 customized themes. Of course, my favorite classic synthwave, inspired by synthwave 84, and we can continue to cycle through. So I'm going to hop all the way back to synthwave, and then we can do things like this, right? Read all TS files. And notice how the capabilities that I'm showcasing, they're not really related to the model. These are layers on top of the model, and these are layers on top of the context and on top of our prompts. We're operating on the agent harness. Okay, so this is a really important theme that I want to communicate to you here, is that the agent harness allows you to kind of up level what you can do with your agentic coding tool. All right, and we're just scratching the surface. We just have to group one example. So you can see here our tools are getting tracked. If we have custom tools, they would get called here as well. And let's go ahead and continue. So one of the things that you'll see here is that unlike Claude Code, Pi does not have sub-agent support. Okay, and so there's just no sub-agent support. So we have to build this in. Okay, and this is the kind of cost to using this tool, is that everything has to be built yourself. But that is also the great part about it, right? Is that this is your agentic coding tool, fully customizable, open source. It's yours. All right, so if we copy this, paste it in here, you can see here that we are running the pure focus extension. So I just want to be purely focused, but I've also added sub-agent support. All right, so in a sub-agent widget, I can do something like this. I'm going to type /sub, and then I'm just going to type a random prompt. I don't know, me, I like to do the classic ping prompt. And so you can see there, a sub-agent ran and responded. Okay, and so just like before, it is going to persist in the user interface. This is very important. We're hooking into the lifecycle events and persisting UI and updating the UI whenever we need or want to. And our agent has responded to our primary agent. Look at that. We just added sub-agent support to our agent. Now, this is custom support. So there are really no limits on this. There are no limits to what you can do. Okay, so for example, let's go ahead and just hit up. Let's get that command again. Summarize this code base in one. We'll do 2 sentences. And I'm going to fire off multiple agents. So every time I run that command, a new sub-agent spawns. And you can see here, these are all unique instances. So imagine you have engineering jobs. Imagine you have, one-off jobs that you need to fire off. Imagine you have, testing. And you'll see here, we have a new extension that I'm calling till done. So not to do, not to done. This is till done, okay? So let me show you what this thing can do. I'll just type ls, and you'll notice something really interesting here right away. So ls, once you ls, you can't do an ls. So I blocked ls from running. My agent must add a to-do item in the list before it runs ls. So check this out. It's gonna finish up here, and let's scroll back up. We have a till done list, not a to-do list. This is a till done. My agent must work until this work is done. And you can see here I've added my own custom rules to this, okay? And so if you're starting to think about, Ralph Wiggum, or you're starting to think about agentic loops, you're starting to think about adding determinism to your agents via hooks or full-on code that wraps your agents, you're on the right track. That's exactly what we're doing here. I blocked my agent using hooks. Of course, Pi has a very extensive hook system we'll break down in a second, but you can see here, ls was blocked, and it needs to create a task list and add an item to the task list before doing that. Then it must manage the task, execute on the task, and then mark it as done, okay? And so now you can see here in my footer, I've updated my footer, I've customized my agentic coding tool to be a till done agent, okay? This thing's gonna run till it's done. What do I mean by that? Let me show you a more concrete example, right? So here's what I'm gonna do, create trees.md, and you know what? Actually, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna make our model dumber, because I wanna show you that controlling the harness can make up for a lot of model mistakes, right? Even the top tier models, but let's go and dumb this model down. Right now we're running Sonnet 4.6. I'm gonna go ahead and look for that haiku, an okay model, but we're definitely talking about bottom tier intelligence, all right? That bottom third. Now, so here's what I want. Here's my micro task. Create tree.md that maps out all the files in this code base in a tree structure. Just file names, don't read any files, right? I don't want this to take forever. So I'm gonna kick this off. And now the till done is going to be the primary mode of operation, okay? And so my agent must have items in the to-do list, and it must complete the item. So it's already done this, right? So create tree.md with code base structure. Very good, right? We can now, load tree.md. You can see that this is a net new file. I have not committed this, and we have a great tree, all right? So fantastic. Let's push this a little further. For each TypeScript file, read it and add a 1-sentence summary to the tree file. Create a to-do item for each file. So now I'm going to leverage this to-do list, and you can see my agent wants to create a new list. In order for it to move on to this next set of tasks, it has to ask me. This is part of the agentic workflow that I've set up with this extension. So I'm going to go ahead and hit yes. There we go. And now it's going to create 16 tasks and start working through them piece by piece. And so our Haiku agent doing a bunch of work, doing it very quickly and saving us cache. Keep in mind, this could have been any agent. I could have picked the new GLM5. I could have picked MinMax 2.5. I could have picked Gemini 3 Flash, right? There are many models that could do this work. And now you can see it's going to update it. It's read all these files, and now it's going to incrementally toggle all the items and mark them done. First in progress and then done. There we go. And now any task that isn't complete, the agent has to work through and mark complete. And so you can see here that it's cutting some corners here. I'm going to accept this. It's trying to clear the list. Any agent that wants to clear the list has to run it by the engineer. All right. So this is a great tool for in-loop agentic coding. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, yes, it did the job. And so the tool served its purpose. So our till done list, got these descriptions added for every single .ts. You can see there's all the .ts files. Fantastic. Another great part about the till done list is that if a task is not complete, right, kind of as you saw here, if a task is not complete, the agent is prompted to keep going. So very, very powerful tool. You can see that I'm customizing the agentic coding experience. Essential ones, which is great, but this means you get more control over every little thing that happens. All right. And then modes, we talked about this, right? There's no real mode in Pi. It's just YOLO mode. It's just do whatever you want. This is where, with Pi agent, you really will want to know what you're doing. That's why I think this is a tool for advanced, mid, senior plus level engineers, where Claude Code lets you really break things down. It has a lot of opinionated defaults for operating. And, if you've been with the channel, you know that I always operate in bypass permissions mode, which is also known as just YOLO mode. And so customizability, once again, is a big deal. Claude Code, to be super fair, lets you customize things to a decent degree, but Pi agent just takes it to the next level. You can customize basically everything. Models, this is pretty straightforward, right? You basically get access to every model when you use Pi. We know that, again, Claude Code is a product. They want you to use their models, right? They want you to do it their way. Pi agent doesn't care. Use whatever you want. Go off, log in. You know that you can use the API key or your Pro or Max subscription. Pi agent lets you use any one that's available. If there's a way to use your ChatGPT Plus, GitHub Copilot, or Gemini CLI plan, Pi agent actually supports that, right? Cost licensing, same kind of deal. We can just kind of run through this. Open source proprietary, subscription costs, bring your own. They both have the /cost command. This is exactly what you would expect, right? And this is one of the big problems that people are having with Claude Code. They're really locking down the usage of their plan. You can really only use their plan on Claude Code or the API keys, all right? All of engineers DM me about this, like asking for validation on this. I've always said that they would shut that down and that they would close that. I'm surprised they left the auth key on the plans open for so long, but here we are. They finally shut it down. It's all API keys or dedicated plans. Nothing more to say here. So this is where things get interesting. Context engineering and prompt engineering. As you know, Claude.md is the default memory file for Claude Code. Pi agent uses agents.md and falls back on Claude. All right, skills, both fully support skills. Skills are industry standard now for agentic coding. Everyone supports it. It's all about where you place them for that quick auto pickup. Commands, same deal. Sub-agents, this is where things get interesting. As you saw, Claude Code has native support via the task tool. Pi does not have support. That's why you saw we have to build that in ourselves. Pi is a minimal agentic coding agent built for you to customize it. Task list to dos, once again, as you saw, we built that in ourselves. We did it manually. While Claude Code has the built-in task list now. It's not called to do anymore. Multi-agent capability, we just saw it. We just covered this in a previous video. Claude Code now has multi-agent capabilities where you can deploy teams of agents to work together and communicate through a centralized message bus. Pi does not have any of that, all right? But as you saw, and not to give it away, you can build this yourself here in a Pi agent. System prompt, you can overwrite the system prompt in Claude Code. With Pi agent, you can do the same. So this is really a tie, but Anthropic doesn't really want to share their system prompt, although it's not super hard to get, but the system prompts are of course customizable. This is a key part of the core 4 context model prompt tools. If you cannot customize the system prompt, you can't use the tool. All right, so this is pretty well known. There are no limitations around this. They both have compact features when you're running out of context window, nothing new there. All right, programmatic and SDK. So they both have great support for programmatic mode. As mentioned, if the tool does not have programmatic mode, throw it out the window right away. You must be able to build out-loop agentic coding tools with the agent harness. Okay, so they both have support for this. The big difference here is that if you're using Pi, they have a TypeScript SDK that you kind of have to use to get true customization. You can run agents directly via Bash on both sides, but Claude Code wins on the SDK support here. They both have export functionality, nothing new there. And we know that on costs, you must use the API key for the Claude Code programmatic mode. And that's the exact same with Pi agents, or if the model provider plan supports it, you can use that. All right, now let's move on to our tier 2 Pi agents. Now this is where things get really interesting. With Pi, you can build in multi-agent orchestration into the experience of the tool. All right, so what do I mean by that? Let's hop back to our just file and let's move to our second group here. All right, so let me show you an agent team. All right, so let's reset, open up a brand new version here. And this is really cool. What you're seeing here is an agent team. We have a scout agent, a planner agent, builder, reviewer, documenter, red team. All right, so you're probably used to some versions, some number of these agents. Let's kick this off and let me just show you how powerful this is. So this is an arbitrary agent team. And I'll do this, scout, find all TS files. Instead of my primary agent doing anything, it has a team of agents that helps them do the work. So this is another version of multi-agent orchestration. If we scroll up here, you can see our primary agent didn't do any work. It doesn't need to. It has agents to do that work on their behalf. Dispatch agent ran, our scouter found all the TS files, and it returned it to our primary agent. Okay, very powerful. Let me get out of Haiku mode here, get out of the Haiku model, and let's hop back to that powerful. Let's go ahead and do like a flash, right? Let's do Gemini 3 flash here. So we can do something like this, right? We'll have the builder move the tree.md h3s moved right after the tree file as a bullet point. We're prompting our primary agent to run the builder agent, but you'll notice here that it used the scouter first to find this stuff. And so it's running scouter prompts. And then after the scout runs, after it finds the information, it's then going to dispatch the builder agent to finish the work. There's the builder. The builder is taking the input from the primary agent that the primary agent got from the scouter, and now it's doing the job, right? It's updating the tree.md file. You can see here in a very, very kind of simple way, we're using multiple agents to drive toward a single outcome. All right, so now if we look at our tree, you can see that it's added the description right next to it. There's a simple version of what multi-agent orchestration looks like. You can see the scouter is running again just to validate that that looks good. Check this out, right? We had 2 agents in this agent team run. And so this is where things get really powerful. Instead of having a whole set of random agents that you can run, instead of running ad hoc agents, you really want to be specializing. This is a big theme we talk about on the channel. Like, specialization is the advantage now. Everyone is going to be running that normal distribution of just junk that comes out of these models. When you give it your prompt and when you build your own custom agentic coding tool on top of it, that's where you really get differentiated results. Now we can do something else with this. If we type /agent team, you can see here we can select a team. This is a default team that just loaded. If we hit agent teams, you can see here I have different teams of agents. I'll click on the plan build team, and now you can see I have a planner, I have a builder, and I have a reviewer. And this all comes from a teams file where you can see I just have a simple YAML configuration for all the teams that puts together unique combinations of my available agents. So, remember, let me make this super clear, right? Pi does not have sub-agent support. So how am I getting multi-agent orchestration? I'm building it myself, right? I customize it. This is all coming from this one extension here, okay? And of course, I have the theme cycler. I'm just stacking that on pretty much on every one of these. So Control X. And so you can see there, I'm just cycling through all the themes. My agents are getting customized. Just love the customization here, right? Let's go ahead and look at the system select. All right, so let's tone things down a notch from our multi-agent setup, and let's fire this up. So system select, what does this do? This allows you to select the system prompt of any one of your agents. As mentioned, Claude Code is a great tool. It has a lot of great defaults, but real engineering work and building solutions for your users and customers requires being specific. It requires specialization so that you can create unique experiences and unique outcomes. So you want to boil that ideology all the way down to your tooling. So here we have a custom slice of pie where we can type slash and then slash system. And when I hit enter here, you can see I can now become any one of my agents. Remember before I mentioned we had that browser agent, headless browser support using the Playwright CLI. We covered agentic browser automation in our previous video. I'll link that in the description if you're interested. But now I've updated the system prompt of this tool. Okay, now I'll just say go to whatever. Let's find something to go to here. Let's go to pi.dev. Dev, summarize the value prop of this tool. This agent is a browser agent. You can see it fired off the Playwright browser skill right away, and now it's running Playwright via the Playwright CLI. You can see some of the results there, and there's the response, right? So this agent fully operated a browser and dug into the capabilities of this agent. Now, again, the key part here is that I can change the primary focus of my agent whenever I want to, all right? And notice what's happening here. You can stack your extensions. They're very, very powerful, very important. These are composable, customizable units of your own agent. Really, really powerful stuff here. You can imagine that my real, primary version of Pi, I build the extensions in isolation, and then I stack up features that I want in different conditions. I am really against this one agent, one model, one tool solution to do everything. It's not really how you create real results, right? A lot of situations require specialization. Let's move on to damage control. What is damage control? Of course, inside of Pi, you have access to all of the available hooks. In the past, we've talked about building a damage control skill to prevent your agents from doing dangerous things like this. rm-rf.claude. Let's get rid of Claude completely. We can't because we have hooks blocking it. Just a quick showcase, you can block any command you want. You can control any piece of Pi that you want to, all right? And so we did that with the damage control extension, okay? This is where things get really interesting. And if you're still watching, I want to thank you by really showcasing how far and how much you can push this. We're going to run this agent chain, and instead of an agent team, check this out. So I'm going to type chain, and let's run a scout workflow. This is a triple scout recon workflow. So I have 3 scout agents chained together. This is an agent chain, also known as an agent pipeline. Use your team, look for all of the commands, skills, and agents, list in bullet point, and state their purpose. Check this out. So I'm going to run a agent chain. This is really where things go parabolic. I'm specializing everything here, okay? So I have a 3 agent execution workflow. It's going to run a scouter, another scouter, and then another scouter, okay? So this might seem really simple and kind of like redundant, but you can put together any agent you want to. And we talk about this on the channel a lot. To scale your impact, you scale your compute. Imagine you create a plan, and we don't need to talk about this. We can actually just do it, okay? So I'm going to copy this again, fire up a new version of this. So we'll select a plan build review team. And so you can see we have 3 unique agents chained together. User team, plan out a new minimal yet unique Pi agent. Right away, our primary agent is going to do a little research to understand what's going on here. Then it's going to kick off its agent team. And so this is very powerful. We have the orchestrator working on the top level, and then it's going to dial its work into its team. You can imagine what's happening here, right? The planner is going to execute, create a plan for the work. The builder is going to build it, and the reviewer is going to review what was built and make sure that it's right. Once again, this is just one of, quite literally infinite agentic workflows, right? Infinite pipelines, infinite chains of agents that you can build, okay? And so you can see our 3 scouter team is done. If we scroll up here, you can see that it's broken down where our agents are. It's broken down some of our skills, tools. So it thinks that skills are tools. We didn't properly explain that. And we have commands and extension hooks, right? Not great. We probably want to throw a smarter model at this problem and give it some more improved setup context. But the idea here is the same, right? I had 3 scouter agents run back to back to back over the output of the previous agent, okay? Agent chain, also known as an agent pipeline. And if you're a tactical agentic coding member, this probably looks or starting to smell familiar to you. We are a few steps away from having this being an ADW, an AI developer workflow. I'll leave that concept inside the course. Let's just keep moving here. And we can see that our planner is finished and our builder is running. Okay, so we're gonna let this agent cook. It is running a pipeline of agents, not just an agent prompting a pipeline. We have an orchestrator agent preparing the prompt, and then firing off to the team. And then you can see the build is finished. Now the reviewer is going to run. Get status. We can see that it created some type of totem extension. No idea what that is or if that's going to be valuable, right? So that's tier 2, right? You can fully orchestrate your agents. Very powerful. We have to give credit where it's due. So this was created by Mario Zechner. He's a prolific engineer. I've been following his work for a while. If we go onto GitHub here, I sponsored, just 3 engineers, and Mario is one of them for his great work on Pi. All right, so big shout out Mario. I think he's shouted out the channel before, not sure, but he has just created a great piece of software. And you might not know this, but this is the agentic coding tool that powers OpenClaw, previously Maltbot, previously ClaudeBot. This tool is very capable, and as you can see, it is customizable to the core. All right, so there are many reasons to choose this tool over another. Big shout out Mario, doing great work, and you can see he's been building a lot recently with the release of this great tool. So tools, MCP servers. Let me just quickly go through the kind of high-level ideas here. One interesting part about Pi, kind of continuing down that trend, is that it does not have MCP support. I think Mario realized relatively early that you can just call the skill via a script or a CLI. All right, so kind of skip that step, skip that growing phase that Claude Code went through. Tool override is another cool capability. You can override the default tools. Edit, write, bash, all of them can be overridden. MCP support, not there. Tool observability, available in both. And of course, default tools, we've covered that. Multi-agent orchestration, as you saw, this is all there. Claude Code has a lot of this built in, but it does not have agent chains or agent pipelines. It does have agent teams. Pi doesn't have any of it, but once again, you can build it. And I hope this theme, I've kind of repeated this theme a million times now. You can do anything you want with Pi, and it solves that main problem of the agent harness for you, like the main theme a million times now. You can do anything you want with Pi, and it solves that you can build it. And I hope this theme, I've kind of repeated this theme a million times now. You can do anything you want with Pi, and it solves that main problem of the agent harness for you, like the main agent loop is done, it's complete, and then it just gives you a full playground to operate on everything else, right? The best parts of the agent. Hooks and events. This is kind of interesting. They both have a whole set of events. Some of them are inline, some of them are not. I'm going to leave a ton of resources for you in the description, and one of them will be a full kind of breakdown of all the hooks and events. And it really comes down to this, right? What is customizable about these tools, right? Let's just be super clear about this, right? This is why Pi is so powerful. You can customize a system prompt. You can use over 25 hooks. You can update the footer, aka the status line. You can change the themes. You can pick any model you want. You can pass in your own CLI flags. Okay, you can register tools not just in programmatic mode, but inside of your in-loop agentic coding tool. All right, you can't do this in Claude Code, right? You have to give it a skill or an MCP. Custom editor mode, don't really care about that, but if you're a Vim guy, support's there. Key bindings, right? You can register custom key bindings. As you saw, we were cycling through themes, and permission by default is just YOLO mode. This is not for engineers that do not know what they're doing. All right, customization, as discussed, Claude Code has some minimal customization, but Pi just takes it all to the next level. They both support message queuing. I consider this a table stake feature, so they both have it, which is great. So the last agent I want to cover here is really an idea. And the idea is you want to be building agents that build agents. You want to be working on that meta level so that you can quickly build out your solutions. Okay, so if we look for Pi, you can see here that I have a meta agent. And so I'm going to kick this off. What you'll see is that I have broken down the capabilities of Pi into their own agent experts. So we're combining a lot of ideas we've talked about on the channel. We've talked about agent experts. We have an entire lesson on it inside of Agentic Horizon. Link in the description for that. This is taking multi-agent orchestration to that next powerful level where you have custom agents that your orchestrator agent is composing and controlling. Let me just showcase how powerful this can be. So I'm just going to say prompt all 8 experts, have them concisely state their purpose. And so when we fire this off, you can see that my primary agent prompted all 8 agents in parallel. And so these are pre-existing agents that have a precise purpose to explain how to build and create new Pi agents. This is a meta Pi agent, and I've delegated all of this special, unique parts about Pi into their own dedicated agents. This is a piece of the future of agentic engineering. One agent is not enough. You want to be stacking these. And once again, here's that theme of specialization. Okay, these generic agents are generic agents. If you want to survive the SaaS onslaught, you better be building specialized solutions that solve problems better than anyone else can. Again, that boils down to your tools and the limitations you have around your tools. You can imagine, as soon as I started spinning up all of these agents to create this demo for you, I stopped around agent 4 or 5 and I said, look where I am. I'm building agents once again in a different specialized format, right? Building Pi agents. Let me create a meta agent to generate these to spec with the right customizations. Okay. And so that's what I have here. I have built a Pi agent that can query experts, subdomain experts, pull together all the information it needs, and then the primary agent will actually make the edit. Okay. I'm out of time here. I'm going to link this in the description for you to dig into yourself. You'll have full access to this code base. All the kind of juiciness is in extensions directory. And if we just hop into one of these, you can see that we have, the till done is a, some 700 line TypeScript file that breaks down exactly how this works. And if we just do a quick collapse here, you can get the gist of it. We registered a new command, till done. We registered a tool for the agent, right? So we can call this whenever it wants to. We have an on input hook that we're catching on. We have another hook on agent end, on tool call, session, so on and so forth, right? You can really see that in order to build these powerful Pi agents, you just want to understand structure, and then you can template it for your agents to deliver these results for you on repeat at scale. But as I mentioned, as a kind of additional theme on the channel, knowing what your agent is doing is engineering, okay? Not knowing is vibe coding, right? I want to keep emphasizing that on the channel. I want to upgrade all the vibe coders. However many vibe coders are watching, shout out to you for really trying to dig deeper and understand things at a deeper level. And for every engineer watching, don't fall into the vibes. Stay sharp with your engineering, understand what you're having your agents do. Agentic engineering means knowing what your agent is doing so that you don't have to look. If you're vibe coding, it means you're not looking and you have no idea what your agent is doing, okay? Big difference between the two. I don't want to sound super harsh here. You're not looking and you have no idea what your agent is doing, okay? Big difference between the two. I don't want to sound super harsh. It means you're not looking and you have no idea what your agent is doing, okay? Big difference between the two. I don't want to sound super harsh here, all right? There are areas where Cloud Code shines. Where Cloud Code really shines is the enterprise platform adoption. If you're a big company, if you're a big team, you have to use Cloud Code. PyAgent is really only experimental, right? Use it inside of your products in very specific ways. Don't deploy this across your entire enterprise, right? Cloud Code has much better support for that. They're winning on the enterprise level. And this is what you should expect, right? PyAgent's literally built by one guy in open source. Let's wrap this all up. Who is PyAgent for? You probably have the gist by now. If you want full control over the agent harness, system prompt tools, event loop, use Py. If Cloud Code does what you need and you don't need more, use Cloud Code. There's nothing wrong with that. But know that you will be limited by what this tool offers, and you'll have to be fine with some more lock-in. So Py is great if you want to use any model out the box. If you want a hedge against Cloud Code, if you don't want to get locked in, definitely use Py. Cloud Code is great for those out of the box, simple customizations. If you need to use a stable agent that doesn't break with changes, frankly, both these tools change quite a bit. But with Py, an open source tool, you can just pin the version, you can fork it, pin it, and it's done. That's the gift of open source. If you want maximum customizability, again, you want Py. On the other hand, if you're a big team, if you're an enterprise, you need to use Cloud Code. They have all the enterprise features. There's no debate here if you're an enterprise, all right? Py's for you if you've outgrown and you've kind of mastered all the out of the box features and you want to push agents further. The kind of meta theme I think about all the time is that you can't get ahead of the curve by doing what everyone else is doing. The fact of the matter is that Cloud Code is now a mainstream tool for engineers, for PMs, for designers, for all types now, right? As I mentioned, Cloud Code has gotten, the curse of success, the curse of growth, almost in a cancer-like way. Now it must grow, right? It's a huge profit point for Anthropic. With that, of course, comes a lot of great things, but it also comes with massive trade-offs. Let's talk strategy here, right? I'm not against Cloud Code. I still use it. I use it every single day, but I am starting to hedge against Cloud Code with a tool like Py. So my strategy here is simple. Bet big on the leader, which is clearly Cloud Code, but hedge with open source with a highly customizable solution, all right? There are a lot of open source options out there. I think Py is the most customizable. Comment down below if I'm wrong. If you think there's another tool that is more customizable than what you've seen here. We're just kind of scratching all the ways you can customize and take these ideas further, all right? So that's my strategy, right? Right now, it's something like 80% Cloud Code, and then I'm starting to hand off 20% to Py for that deeper level experimental next-gen agentic coding. It's nice to have a quick tool where I can rapidly prototype ideas and get ROI for building out specific agent teams, and we're using a great paradigm, a great set of teams. You probably want to do it a specific way, and Py lets you do just that. Zooming all the way out here, I've built a dedicated agentic coding tool that helps me generate new Py agents, okay? So notice that, right? We've zoomed all the way out. The agentic coding path looks something like this. You start with a base agent, you improve it to a better agent, you become proficient with your context engineering and your prompt engineering, then you customize those agents, and that's where a lot of value is. And then you add an orchestrator agent to help you control, manipulate, CRUD all of the specialized agents that you've built, right? Most engineers, most builders are using Cloud Code for that, just out of the box Cloud Code. But you can take that much further. That orchestrator is very, very powerful. And we're back on that key theme, that kind of edge of agentic engineering. You want to be orchestrating this, right? The big question is how much can you scale this? How much can you push, useful agents, specialized agents doing useful work with your orchestrator? Because at some level, you just can't be in 5, 10 terminals, in loop, out loop, web version, local version. At some level, you need something like this to kind of guide that entire experience. That's the strategy. Py for control, for deep customization and experimental next-gen agentic coding, all right? I think in ands, not ors. I recommend you do the same. Use the right tool for the job at the right price. Don't limit yourself. As engineers, we are limited by our tools. So experiment with this. Give it some time. I have an entire code base ready for you. Link in the description. Just experiment a little bit. Play with it a little bit. Just see what you could do. And maybe your engineering mind is going to go off and it's going to think, okay, I know a problem I can apply a custom agentic coding tool to that will give us outsized results. But you'll never find that if you don't just play with it, if you don't give it a shot, because you'll be constantly limited by what you're seeing everyone else do and the normal distribution of tools that everyone's using, right? Which right now is Cloud Code. We're in the age of slop. We're in the age of agents. We're going to be experiencing a lot of the same thing generated by these agents everywhere. Specialization doesn't stop at the model, agent, or orchestration level. You can customize your agentic coding tool. That's the big idea I wanted to connect with you here on today. I'll be sharing some additional private code bases where we push these ideas to the edge for tactical agentic coding and Agentic Horizon members. So if you're interested, check out my take on how you can scale far beyond the norm with powerful agentic engineering. The whole goal is to build code base